Hello, everybody, and welcome to Reap the Spoils. I'm Mark Sullivan,
I'm Delilah Lugo.
I'm Jason Kwasnicki.
and today we are going to be talking about the 1994 film *The Mask*, starring Jim Carrey and Cameron. No, I'm just kidding. Um, Delilah, what game
I
are we
get
talking
it
about?
because Atreus and yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk about that too. Delilah, what are we talking about? What game? What's the name of the game?
God of War Ragnarok.
Yeah. So Reap the Spoils, monthly spoiler cast, where we pick a game, we play that game, and then we come here and we talk to each other about it, oftentimes for a really long time. If you have not played the game that we're talking about, which is the game Delilah just said, God of War Ragnarok, it's also in the title of the episode. If you've not played God of War Ragnarok, I strongly implore you, I beg you, pause the episode, go play God of War Ragnarok, then come back and listen to us spoil it for you. If you really don't want your first experience with this game to be playing it, I mean, I don't know why. It was a pretty good game. Like, I enjoyed it. I would suggest you go play it before you hear us talk about it. But like, we're gonna spoil the whole damn thing. So, continue at your own risk.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Probably also kind of talk about the older games as well.
yeah. We're gonna talk about God of War 2018. We did an episode on God of War 2018 in 2020. We recorded an episode on that. It's in the Reap the Spoils back catalog. So if you have not listened to that episode or played that
So,
game, go play that game and listen to that episode too.
yeah, can we establish ground rules here for talking about the events of 2018 and also the original trilogy? Because some of it is very
Well,
relevant here.
yeah, well, we will.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's probably going to be light spoilers about the original trilogy. Probably not to the extent that was in the God of War 2018 episode that we did, just because there's not that much to bring up.
Well,
Um,
basically God of War Ragnarok spoils the events of those games or mentions them.
yeah, like, a lot of that stuff's gonna come up. So, like, I mean, if you look, I can't imagine that you're here listening to this episode of Reap the Spoils on God of War Ragnarok and this being your first God of War game, and that you haven't played 2018. At the very least, right? Like 2018,
Yeah.
I feel is required playing to enjoy Ragnarok to its fullest. So yeah, once again, if you haven't played it, pause here, go play that, and then Ragnarok, and then listen to both our episodes. The one we did on 2018 and the episode we're recording and you're listening to right now. This one on God of War Ragnarok. And yeah, there'll be light spoilers on the original trilogy, the original games, because some of that stuff does come up. But like, I can't imagine we're gonna bring up, stuff from those games to the extent that we brought up in 2018. They don't play as much importance in this game as they did in that one. But like, it helps to have played those. So you've been warned thoroughly about what you should have played by now and what we're going to spoil. I should hope that none of this comes as a significant surprise to any of you listening. Are we good now?
Yes.
Have we given sufficient warning? Cool. Awesome. The only other thing that I want to bring up right at the top of the episode is if you are a long time Reap the Spoils listener, we really appreciate your support. We would appreciate it so much more, infinitely more, to the stars and beyond, if you would rate and review the show. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, rate and review the show, like it on YouTube, whatever, share the show with people you know. It really helps us grow, and the feedback that we've gotten. I've gotten some feedback recently. It's been invaluable. It's been really helpful, and it really makes me feel good to know that people are listening, are engaging, and yeah, that continues to be something that I look forward to.
Yes.
So yeah, with all that being said, are we ready for a history lesson, a brief history lesson on God of War Ragnarok?
Mm-hmm.
Jason,
Yes.
you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Just
I
making
actually have
sure.
something to add at the end.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
Okay, all right, here we go. All aboard the history train for God of War. All aboard the history. I don't know, steed, the history wolf, whatever animals people ride, and what are those things? The things that the Einherjar would ride on. You know what
I
I'm talking
forgot what they're
about?
called.
Yeah,
I
I
forgot
can't
what they're
remember what
called,
they're
but I know
called.
what you're
In
talking
the
about.
game or mythology?
No, in the game. Well, I guess in mythology too, but in the game, I can't remember
Well,
their names.
they
It
they
doesn't
ran
matter.
they beam down through the Bifrost in the game.
Yeah, but I don't know. But they also there were also enemies that they rode on. All right, never mind. We'll talk about it later.
Oh,
Um,
oh, oh, yes,
yeah, you know what I'm talking about now. It
yes.
was a bad joke. It was a horrible transition. Let's just get into the history lesson. Okay, so God of War 2018 obviously came out in 2018, not 2017, not 2019, but in 2018 on April 20th, the National Marijuana Day. Um, I don't think Kratos was high on that day, but could have been hiding something in that beard. But anyway, that game released to widespread critical acclaim. It
I think
won
he was high.
the
He was very suspicious of everybody in that game.
uh that game largely won Game of the Year awards across so many outlets, including the big one, the Jeff Keighley Game Award for
Lottie
Game of the
Dottie, who gets
Year.
the Gotti?
Yeah.
That, that is a direct quote, by the way, folks, from Jeff Kaplan of Blizzard Games, formerly.
uh okay. Very, very good, very cool. So yeah, God of War 2018, really well liked game. Go listen to our episode if you want to hear our thoughts on it. um at the time, there were some teases coming out about the next game. There was a God of War theme that came out for PS4 that had written on Norse runes on the side of the boat, Ragnarök is coming. And then Cory Barlog, the game director for God of War 2018, put out this Twitter thread talking about the development of the game. And a lot of people clued into the fact that in that Twitter thread, each tweet began with letters, and the people took those letters and put them together and saw that they wrote out Ragnarok is coming. So like they were all being really cheeky about teasing this supposed untitled sequel to God of War 2018. And it was teased in 2020. There was some people might remember this about 2020, other than there was a fucking pandemic that began that year and made that year a pile of shit for everybody. There was a PS5 showcase because the PS5 was revealed and it was coming out that fall. And in that PS5 showcase, there was a teaser for the next God of War, and all it had was the symbol and then just a tagline, Ragnarok is coming. So we still didn't know technically what the title of the game was for quite some time. And there was a year attached to that teaser, 2021. Spoilers, this game did not come out in 2021. We all just played it. It all just came out this past month. You didn't miss it for a year. It did not release when they initially expected it to release. Neither did a lot of games. Um
They
and we didn't
prophesized that it would release, but it did.
There was a prophecy, but they defied it. We actually didn't find out the official name of this game officially for about a year. The title of the game and like actual footage of the game was revealed a year later on September 9th, 2021, and another in the following PlayStation showcase. Um, so and then it was revealed to be God of War Ragnarok, which everyone assumed it would be. Like everyone was pretty sure it was going to be God of War Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Kind of would have been weird if it wasn't.
Specifically
Um,
because they confirmed they were only doing 2 games, not a trilogy.
yeah, and they did confirm that at some point because the way Cory Barlog put it was it took 5 years to make God of War 2018, and it took almost 5 years to make God of War Ragnarok. He didn't want to tell They didn't want to tell us the story over a 10 to 15 year period.
Right.
So they wanted this to be the final act of that story and not make people have to wait another 5 years for the conclusion. They wanted to conclude it now. And we'll talk about that conclusion very shortly. So yeah, the game obviously was hit with lots of delays. There were lots of issues with the pandemic, and there were also some health issues with Christopher Judge, I think involving his back. I believe he had to get back surgery or something. Christopher Judge being the actor who plays Kratos. And that's not just voice acting, that's also mocap. So there's lots of physicality involved there. So he tried to put some of the blame on himself, but everyone was super supportive of that. Whatever. Cory Barlog had this very staunch approach where whenever people asked him, "Hey, when's the game coming out?" he would say when it's done or when it's ready, something along those lines. And the game eventually did come out on November 9th, 2022 for both the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5. Also of note was that Cory Barlog was not the game director for this
I
one.
was just about to. That was
He
part of my
was yeah, he needed a break. He took on a creative director role and a producer role and was not the primary director of this game. This game was actually primarily directed by Eric Williams, who has worked on the God of War series before. I believe he also he specialized in combat for a long time. I believe some of his other credits were with Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, a
Mm.
game which was widely lauded for its combat. One of the few things that people did like
yeah.
about that game.
It's kind of a cult classic in
Yeah.
that sense. Yeah.
So yeah, Eric Williams was the primary director of this game. So
And
Jason, was that the only thing you wanted to add, or was there something
no,
else?
I did want to specifically point out that Barlog did not.
Barlog.
I always want to say Balrog. Barlog did not direct the game. It was directed by somebody else. And the three criterion, the only 3 points that Cory Barlog gave to this guy was. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but this is just
Ugh,
context for
you
later.
didn't let me give the last spoiler. Okay, wait. Before you continue, I'm gonna bleep that. I'm gonna say, everyone, if you have not played God of War Ragnarok, please pause the episode.
Sorry.
If you don't want us to spoil it, pause the episode, go play the game, then come back and listen to the rest of the episode. This is your final warning. We are going to spoil God of War Ragnarok. Final warning. That's it. Okay, Jason, go ahead.
Okay, so the three directives that were given from Barlog was Atreus has to leave, Brock has to die, Ragnarok has to happen, and
Yeah.
that was the only three solid things that was given to him. Also worth noting, God of War 2018, to the best of my knowledge, had one main writer and two assistants. This game had, I think, 8 or 9 different writers, and based on tweets that various members of that writing group made, it seems like different writers were assigned different parts. Like some did like side dialogue, some did main scenes. And I only bring that up because it will become relevant later on when we talk about dialogue story. I just wanted to preface our discussion of the actual game with those changes from the behind the scenes of the first game.
Okay. I did know about the three things that needed to happen with this one. I don't know much about the who was involved in the writing process, but I know they did have a good number of writers involved with this game, and some taking on different tasks at different points. Um, but yeah, you guys ready to just talk about the ending? Get right
Yeah.
into it.
Yes,
Yeah. So Ragnarok happens, right? Like there's a big battle in Asgard.
it was a thing.
I don't know that it's like quite on the scale. How did you guys feel about that walk? Like I thought it was really epic with Kratos taking on this general role, stepping back into the shoes of being a war general and preparing everyone for this
Mm.
big fight, and blowing the Gjallarhorn was a really cool moment. All the portals opening up and then going through into Asgard. I don't know how everyone beat him to the punch of getting to Asgard and suddenly it's just chaos as soon as they walk through, but I feel like I feel like it wasn't as I don't know, it wasn't as big as I expected, and it wasn't as long as I expected.
It
What
was
did you guys think about that?
it was like watching the finale of a giant Marvel movie, and I've seen this comparison made a lot between this game and Marvel movies, and I think it's warranted. The more I think about it, it's like watching the finale of a Avengers movie, but the cinematographer decided that they're gonna like focus the camera on the ground and not all of the surrounding action and set piece going on behind you. Because the entire time the battle's going on, you're just running through hallways and killing the same bog standard enemies you've been killing. And you would have to
Yeah,
stop the sequence and literally turn the camera to try to look over the wall and see what's going on around you. And so they just have characters come reporting to you what's happening around you. You don't really get to see the armies you're fighting with. You barely get a glimpse of the world serpent.
and I think that's really just that it's really just down to how Asgard was kind of structured in terms of it really is just like another level, but it doesn't feel like this big bombastic battlefield or battleground. It's just Kratos is playing through a God of War level, not Kratos is engaging in Ragnarok.
Yeah,
So-
I could
so-
see that.
Yeah,
yeah,
by the time everything, and we'll get to the events that transpire, the final boss fights, what have you.
yeah.
But by the time I reached the first credits, I was kind of like, yeah, I guess that happened. Like I was like,
Delilah, you want to expound more on your feelings,
Yeah,
or
I was just gonna say, like, I could definitely see the Marvel comparisons, and also that it didn't feel like a big like Ragnarok is coming kind of thing. But it still was epic, like the way they composed the music, and even like the background, seeing like I call him Snaky Chung, but Jorgen Munder, I think is his name, right? I could never say these things right.
Jormungandr.
Um,
Jormungandr, yeah.
seeing all that stuff in the background while you're going through, it felt like everything else was epic rather than what you were doing as a character. So
Yeah,
I can see it feeling like not as epic as maybe it could have been. But I still enjoyed the sequence a lot, and it made me excited to see like all the characters coming. It was very Marvel, it's true, and I think that's why I enjoyed it. But yeah, it would have been cool to see at least Kratos or like other characters around you doing more, especially characters that you grew to like know and understand and love and stuff like that.
I just like I don't have a problem with the foot soldier on the ground and focusing on them like aspect. And there was some cool set pieces that occurred during that thing, take it, redirecting the gun and having that attack what was it? Him through his flaw or whatever in the wall so they could blast a way open into the fortress. Um
Yeah,
and
Hmm.
like Sindri's, when we'll talk about Sindri, we got a lot to say about Sindri. Like his absolute just like nasty attitude about the whole thing, and he's just there to get it done and over with, and he's still pretty pissed at you or by you I mean Kratos and Atreus both, about everything that transpired prior to this event. But like I that part was cool. It's just the way that the level was structured was just so, it was so linear and winding, and took you in areas where like you couldn't really see anything interesting going on other than like in all the way in the distance you would see like another gate fall, and it's like, oh well, there goes our reinforcements from Alfheim, we're not getting any more elves to come help us.
yeah.
Shit like that is just, you never really got to see the much of the armies that actually came through for you,
Hmm.
Right.
and that was a bit disappointing. It's kind of why I say, like, how did they beat you to the punch of getting to Asgard? What wasn't the whole goal of blowing Yallarhorn and Tyr's temple that all the portals would be open there? And so I thought all the armies were going to come
Not.
in and you were all going to go into Asgard together, whereas you just kind of blow the horn, walk into Asgard, and everyone's been already fighting as if they've been fighting for the past hour or so.
Not to mention
Hmm.
the whole drama of the situation is undermined by the fact that you have a wolf that can tear through reality of the realms and just teleport everybody inside of Asgard anyway, and you're not using it.
Well, to be fair, yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I don't really disagree with that, I guess. Um, but yeah, to be fair, that they had to get all those portals open so all the armies could come through. It would kind of take a lot more time if Garm slash Fenrir had to go to each place and have the armies come through. By the time they did that, maybe one army would already be gone or what have you. Um, but
It's kind of it's kind of it's kind
I
of
get
like
what
the
you're
eagle.
saying.
It's kind of like the Eagles in Lord of the Rings. Like, kind of
Yeah.
just got to accept. I mean, granted, in that case, there actually is deep lore reasons, but you would have to go fishing for that.
You'd have to read the Silmarillion.
Yes.
Oh, I was just kidding. I was
No.
actually
I'm.
trying to
I'm.
be on. Wow. All right. Um. So the before we continue with Ragnarok, the last thing I do want to bring up regarding Jormungandr is because Jormungandr doesn't really come up much in this game, um, and to bring in some Norse myth, because I do want to talk about some actual Norse mythology connections and stuff. Jormungandr is supposed to be one of Loki's beast children,
Yeah.
um, alongside Fenrir and Hel.
No,
and
Mm.
other children.
I
Loki's had
forget.
other
I
children, but
forget. Is this one of the ones that he had with Angrboda, or one of the ones that he
so
just like forged out of his
yes.
asshole? Like,
No, no, no.
all right,
Yeah,
just
So
Fenrir is
just
definitely with
just,
Angerboda, I
just,
think.
just to give
Loki.
everybody a frame of reference for mythology, Loki like gets fucked by an eight-legged horse or some shit like
No,
that.
no, 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 not exactly. Loki fucks a regular horse. All
Or he
right.
fucks the horse. I'm sorry.
Yes. Well,
I'm sorry. He fucks the horse. The horse didn't fuck him.
he takes the form of a female horse to lure this other horse that belongs to this is actually him trying to deter the giant who built the wall of Asgard from finishing the wall, because they were kind of trick him into doing as much work as possible but not finishing it, so they didn't have to reward him at the end. So Loki takes the form of a female horse. This is not in the game, by the way. This is an actual Norse myth. We are really off the rails already in
I'm
the
sorry I
20-minute
brought it
mark.
up. Yeah.
Fantastic. Loki takes the form of a female horse to lure the giant wall builder's male horse away, and yeah, he gives birth from that horse. He gives birth to Sleipnir, an eight-legged horse, who then becomes Odin's horse. Sleipnir is not in this game. If I recall, Sleipnir is mentioned once in a shrine in the first game, or 2018, not the first game, but God of War 2018, and that's all we know of Sleipnir. So Sleipnir is not like involved with this game at all.
Thank
Um.
goodness.
Anyway, anyway, yeah. Loki has, back to actual content that is in this game. Loki and Angerboda have 3 beast children, and those are Hel, who is not in this game at all, or in this continuity at all, from what I understand, or at least not in the same way. Jormungandr, who we obviously see, and Fenrir, who we also obviously see,
Don't they
but
mention Hell and say that Hraesvelgr took over
Hell,
Helheim from
yeah, like
Hell?
Hell
Yeah.
existed prior though. Like
Yeah.
they're not trying to find any way to fit her in as
Right.
like one of like someone that Loki birthed in any way. In this case, the two children that did kind of come through to this continuity, because I guess they didn't want to have any sort of sex scene between 2 13-year-olds, and frankly I'm okay with
Good.
that. Good, right? They came up with different ways for those children to have been birthed, which are kind of interesting. Fenrir, is a normal wolf that dies at the very beginning of the game. Very sad.
Yeah.
And he accidentally transfers Fenrir's soul to his knife, and then when they're fighting Garm, who is a completely different giant wolf in Norse mythology, Garm is a dog, a giant dog, wolf, whatever you want to call him, in Hell that guards Hell. I thought it was kind of neat how they managed to transfer Fenrir in like a
Yeah.
organic way into this game.
That was also
As
a really cool fight.
Yeah, it was. Well, God, man, I beat the first time you fight Garm, got the trophy, and I thought that was it. So I texted my friend and was like, "All right, I beat Garm," and he accidentally spoiled the fact
Oh,
that Fenrir
no.
gets put into Garm's body before I had gotten there, because I didn't realize that I wasn't actually done.
Right.
But like
Yeah.
I beat that boss. It was in the morning before I had to log off for work, so I beat that boss, got the trophy, and was like, "Oh, cool, Garm's done." And then I logged off and texted him.
Yeah.
That was kind of funny, but
That was a cool little addition because I actually thought I knew that Atreus like had the soul of Fenrir. I didn't know what he was gonna do with it. I thought like maybe he might transform into him, but then he transformed into like another like blonde wolf instead.
mm,
So yeah, I actually thought that something different was gonna happen. And then when we
see,
had Big Doggo, I was like, hell yeah, let's go.
see, my dumbass thought that it was Faye's
Hey,
soul in the
so I
knife,
thought the same thing. Yes.
which like
Which
would not have made any sense.
Yeah.
But like I don't know. Angerboda brings up there being a soul in the knife, and I totally forgot about the the mysterious spell that got cast at the beginning of the game when Fenrir died. So I was just like, oh, I guess it's just Faye's soul. All right, whatever, cool.
that's what I thought when she brought it up.
Yeah, and then like Loki or God, Atreus. I would prefer to call him Atreus. Atreus refers, brings up the fact that Fenrir's soul is in the knife, not even in like a cutscene, but just like in dialogue while you're running around in hell. And I was like, oh, it's kind of interesting that they're clarifying like some important plot details, like just in normal ass like running around dialogue.
They do
In,
that a lot.
It's
in,
not, yeah, it's not the only time the game does that. It does that several times.
between his Peter Parker quips, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Or telling you that you're on fire.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but
We're like touching
yeah,
on so
well,
many things. We need to get
anyway,
back to the actual ending. Yeah.
besides Fenrir, I want to talk about Jormungandr, because Jormungandr is this big snake that they find in oh god, what's her name? It's Angerboda's grandmother.
Gryla.
Gryla.
Yeah, Gryla. They find the snake, like the soulless snake, in her home, and there are these marbles, these stones that have giants in them, and Atreus puts one of the souls into the snake, and that's how he births Jormungandr. And that explains why Jormungandr recognizes him in 2018. It's, you know, it's a younger, weirdly younger version of his, you know, you want to call him his father, but not like his creator almost.
Right.
Yeah.
His savior, you could call him even.
And to kind
Um,
of bring it back to the events of Ragnarok, the point we're at, you do during the battle see Jormungandr in the distance, and obviously Thor is like a bolt of lightning. Kind of, they're going at it.
yeah, and
At which
it's
point
not.
he gets hit and disappears, which everybody has kind of assumed means he got warped back in time. He was hit so hard by Thor.
That's what happens in the myth of Ragnarok. Yeah,
Right.
is that Thor hits him so hard with the hammer that he gets sent back in time.
But
Which like
yeah.
that, the fact that that's Jormungandr, the how Jormungandr got birthed, and the fact that he was sent back in time are other things that are just said in just like walking around dialogue.
Hmm.
So you got to pay attention to that stuff
Yeah.
if you want the full experience of the plot here. This is a very difficult game to listen to podcasts while
Oh
playing.
yeah, no, you can't. No, no, no,
No.
absolutely not.
I did, but I had to pause a lot. Basically, anytime anyone opened their mouth, I had to pause what I was listening to, which was difficult.
Yeah, I was streaming
Um,
this game and I found myself like just like quiet a lot, just listening to dialogue all the time or
yeah,
like listening to cutscenes. They never shut up really.
no, they
It's
really don't.
very rare that there's silence.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, Jormungandr gets sent back in time by Thor, and then you fight Thor. What'd you guys think of the second fight with Thor?
It was fun. I find well, not all the combat, all the main combat, the main like not the extra stuff, but like the main bosses,
Yeah, yeah.
including Thor. I find those fights to be fun.
Yeah.
The required reading, so to
I
speak.
mean,
Yeah.
I mean, Thor was one of my favorite characters in this game, and leaving aside my bias for Ryan Hurst, I
Yeah,
no,
because you do have a bias for Ryan Hurst.
but I did very much enjoy this, probably because it's in many ways the same story of the role he played in Sons of Anarchy. Um, but in terms of the second fight, I guess going back to what we were talking about earlier, like you're just fighting him in the yard outside of Odin's house. Like whereas in the beginning of the game, he launches you out of the house and you go in this big giant ice crater in the middle of the lake and there's a frozen bolt of lightning. It's so epic. And the second fight
Yeah.
was still fun. The fight itself mechanically was still fun and I enjoyed it. I was just like, we're just fighting in Odin's front yard.
It was a
And
much more technical fight than a spectacle one. The very
right.
beginning of the game is very much a spectacle. You're bouncing around all over Midgard, and there's the frozen lightning bolt that pops up at the Lake of Nine during that fight. And
But again, it's like it's Ragnarok. This is like if Iron Man fought what was it, Thanos like in Tony Stark's front yard. I don't know. Like
yeah. Um,
I guess
And
it's because Thor isn't like this big giant thing. Like every spectacle fight in this game was like a big dog or a big something, you know? And I mean, that's kind of how it's been in the God of War series period, where when you're fighting something big, it feels like a spectacle. Whereas when you're fighting just someone that's like taller than you or around your size, it's like, oh, okay, it's like a very specific kind of battle.
yeah, but also it's Thor, you know? He's the mightiest of all the Norse gods. The legends of Thor are large and are many, and I don't know. I kind of agree with Jason. This is Ragnarok, and nothing really felt on the scale that it needed to be, including that fight to an extent. But it does reach a conclusion of Kratos. You know, he comes to a point of mercy where he's like, I don't want to kill you. I don't want to do this, and I don't have to. And Thor almost kind of finds some redemption in himself before.
Right. He he
Uh,
he makes the right choice and finally breaks free of, this kind of pathology he has with his father, and he makes his own choice, which I really liked.
and then
Yeah.
his
Right.
father kills him.
Well, I'm fine with Odin killing him. It's the manner in which it happens, which is like throughout the game, Thor is getting fucking stabbed. He's got a scar all throughout the game where
Yeah.
Kratos fucking impaled him with the Leviathan axe, and Odin just pokes him with a spear, and he like evaporates.
To be
Yeah.
fair, it's Odin's spear. It's
I mean, yes, I
Gungnir.
know in
Gungnir is a
mythology, yeah,
yeah,
in mythology, Odin's spear is like the spear of death. Like he throws it at mortals, and they can't escape it no matter what they do. It's like it's supposed to be like a metaphor for death. Yes, I get it,
yeah.
but it's still like is a bit immersion breaking when like you literally fucking rip open his guts and they remain scarred the entire game. It's just a little thing, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
It
I
doesn't
get it.
ruin the Thor arc for me. It was one of my favorite parts of the game.
Hmm. Um, and then we proceed to fight Odin. What did you guys think of the Odin fight?
I didn't
The
really like that
final
fight.
boss.
You fight him in a fucking basement again.
Yeah, I mean, why does that bother you so much? I don't know. I guess I don't understand. It's not like just a basement. It's like the secret cave under the lodge where this like I don't know. This whole subplot is a really dumb one in my opinion, and we'll talk about it because I feel like it has to be taught. It's kind of like the MacGuffin quest that keeps the plot moving for a lot of the game. This stupid tear in reality that like Odin is desperately trying to look into. Like you fight him in that room, in that area, with like that is a core part of the story. It kind of makes sense.
It
Um,
does. It,
that the final battle would eventually lead down there. But go ahead.
What bothered me about the fight wasn't that was in basement, but more so that
it
just the
was
structure of it. Like,
yeah.
oh, I have to die. Oh, he's over there and he's doing like some AoE attack here. So let me go on this other platform. And that was just kind of the strategy. And I don't know, it just felt like
It was very mechanically
boring.
underwhelming compared to all the other boss fights. Which,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
for
kind
the
of where
most
I'm
part,
at.
the boss fights for me were some of, if not my favorite parts of this game.
Yeah.
I'm
Can we
actually
just
what I'm
just
not.
all real quick say what our favorite boss fight was?
Oh, Garm.
Oh, okay, that's a good
I
one.
like Garm, but also what was that lizard thing that you and Freya fought together?
Man,
Well,
you guys did not
Neathog.
say what I thought you were gonna say. Neathog.
Neathog.
Neathog is
Needhog. Yeah, that was a really epic fight too.
Heimdall, man. Heimdall
Heimdall was a good
was
fight.
such a cool fucking fight.
Yeah, I like how they did the 1-2 switch on Heimdall's fight. Like
Yeah.
everything you're used to doing, you're like, no, wait, you got to pause for a minute.
I
Use,
think the reason Garm was mine was because A, it captured the scale of the OG games,
yeah,
and B, because it was the boss fight with the least fucking input from your side character, because the mechanics were basic enough and I got them fast enough that I guess the game didn't feel the need to tell me what to do.
yeah,
Yeah, we'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, all very cool fights. I think we just hit like the top 3 boss fights of the game. All of which happen, I would say snugly in the middle. Nithog
Mhm.
happens earliest out of those three, and then
Yeah.
Garm, and then Nimdall. But I think those are all the mechanically most interesting,
Mhm.
and uh, probably the toughest, at least in the sense that you don't just get through it by being strategic about dodging and hitting things over and over again. You
Yeah.
actually have to do
Right. You have to
something.
target specific
Yeah.
things. You have to use specific combinations of weaponry. Yeah.
Or really just employ more unorthodox strategies that you
Right.
might not usually employ.
Hmm.
Odin, I feel for a final boss is kind of a forgettable boss fight.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I don't really remember much about it, if I'm being
Just a lot
completely
of
honest.
like lasers and not even lasers, but like balls of fire and just random things
Well,
being thrown at you that you have to
Yeah,
avoid.
we'll get
yeah,
more into it when we talk about Odin as a character, but they decided to go with the more sorcerer interpretation of Odin. Like there are interpretations of Odin depending on which Scandinavian oral tradition you're looking at, where he's more the warrior. There are also those where he's kind of like a wandering sorcerer, garbed in
and I
gray.
think
Gandalf is specifically based on Odin.
and I
Those
think
interpretations, at
that's
least. But
I think that's the more sensical interpretation of him. Even if Odin starts off as a warrior, and sure, Odin has proven himself as a warrior, Odin's main thing, the thing that he wants most, and
his
the thing that he's
knowledge, yeah.
constantly seeking is knowledge. Right? He's he might not be Mimir and be as smart as Mimir is, or even in most interpretations, Kvasir, who's the wisest of them all, but he is still constantly after knowledge, and his character really reflects that. So him
Yeah.
being kind of more a mage type, if you want to put it that way, I think makes the most sense. Um,
Which I guess is why I focus so much on fighting him in the basement, where it's basically just an arena where, like Delilah said, it's mechanically uninteresting. He's just throwing fireballs and stuff at you. Where like if if it's a sorcerer fight, you could at least have him like, I don't know, you have these giant walls around Asgard. You never have a fight on top of them. Something of that magnitude to really show off and at least and really achieve some of that spectacle. That there are just so many things I could think of off the top of my head that you could do with it. I don't know.
yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, I can't disagree. But okay, let's real quick. Let's talk about this mask. This mask is the thing that Odin tasks Atreus with helping him restore when Atreus eventually goes to Asgard to find out, what Odin knows, what he's trying to do to prevent Ragnarok from happening. This mask, I don't get it. This isn't like a thing in Norse mythology that I can find anything on or recall anything about. And the joke that I said at the top of the show,
Yeah.
referencing the fucking Jim Carrey The Mask movie based on the Dark Horse comic, just like, what is this?
So
Why?
it's a MacGuffin, like you said, but thematically it makes sense because it's trying to parallel Odin's pursuit of knowledge with what Loki's doing throughout the game, and how that reckless pursuit of knowledge um, could lead to bad. The road to hell is paved with bad or good intentions. Sorry,
Mhm.
where Odin's intentions, I mean, granted, it's more selfish, but he's trying to discover, what lies beyond for the gods. He's trying to get a look into this tear in reality, in the same way that Loki is trying to do these things to prevent prophecy. He's trying to help people, but it
Right.
leads both of them to make reckless decisions, which is why it's Loki in the end who confronts him, like, will you be better? Will you change? And he's like, nah. And then Loki takes him out.
Yeah.
It looked like in that part with Odin, it looked like he did see something in the tear, and then like he had like a facial expression, but they just never really showed
Well,
anything.
that's the other thing that bothers me is they claim that Odin lost his eye by trying to look into the tear, and Mimir,
Yes,
I believe, had also already told the tale of how Odin actually lost the eye,
a cup of mead.
and it was the correct one, or the one that has been told before in time through the myths, and that's that Odin wanted to drink from Mimir's fountain, or his oh god, his
He wants a cup of
well,
mead. Yeah, it's a cup of mead. Yeah,
no, it's hold on. I
it
have this
depends which
pulled up.
version you look, but the one I like is the cup of mead.
Okay, well, I mean, yeah, you could go with a cup of meat if you really want to, but I
The,
believe
the,
it's
that's
go
not
ahead.
what matters. What matters is that Odin cuts his own eye out to get knowledge, which
Yes,
which is
that
which
that
is the
is
metaphor that knowledge changes people.
it's water. If you follow Neil Gaiman's book Norse mythology, I highly recommend. By the way, it's Mimir's well of water well, and it's one of the wells. It's one of the water sources that feeds the world tree Yggdrasil.
Right,
Mm,
He wants to drink from this well, and Mimir says, "No, you can't. It will cost you." He's
mm,
like, "What will it cost me?" He's like, "An eye," and he's like, "Give me a knife," and he cuts his eye out, and that's how he loses an eye. So
yeah.
this nonsense about some tear in reality that he looks at, and he's probably lied about it. Like, it's probably a lie, and it even comes up in in-game dialogue. Atreus brings it up to Mimir after he meets Odin and stuff, and Odin tells him that, and he says, "Hey, Odin's story is different from your story about how he lost his eye." And Mimir's like, "Well, do you really believe him over me, your good buddy?"
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, so somebody's wrong here. It's probably Odin just pulling someone's leg. It's not the first
right.
time, or it's certainly not the last time he would have been deceitful about something. But I don't know. This whole mask plot kind of sucked, in my opinion. It was just so weird and like original, but not original, because it was like aping something that really didn't have anything to do with this mythology or God of War. I mean, it did in a sense, because like that comic and the Mask movie, like th- that the Mask was supposedly created by Loki, but like I don't know. It's like bringing in lore and history from something completely unrelated, and I'm not even saying that like they clearly aped that comic or that movie. The but the parallels are really fucking similar.
Hmm.
It's kind of hard to look at that and be like, yeah, you definitely didn't pull that from this.
Well, that entire plot line with Loki, Odin, and the mask. If you think about it, it's really just a plot device that is there to allow you to see other stories that are far more interesting. So, like, we'll get into it. Thor's story, and when I say Thor's story, I'm encompassing all the character, his daughter,
Yeah,
his
yeah,
wife.
Thrud
You see
and
that
Sif.
all through those Loki sections that are ostensibly about the mask, but they're really not. The same goes, for Thor's relationship with all the Asgard stuff, getting a deeper sense of those characters, and also creating the drama with Kratos. That's
Yeah.
really all that plot. So the plot is really nothing in and of itself, other than the thematic element I just talked about. But drawing that parallel between Odin and Loki.
Yeah, I just wish that the thing that was moving that forward and causing all that to happen was less silly and weird and
You mean like Kratos admitting what his true past is, and Loki having a reaction to it that for some reason gets relegated to side dialogue with Freya, but we'll get into that.
what do you wait, what are you
His
talking about?
his family that as far as we
Oh,
know Loki doesn't know about.
yeah, that will. Hey, at least they acknowledge that. At least for once, these new games acknowledge that
Yeah.
Kratos had a family before. Um, I do wish it was brought up a little more, and I do wish that Atreus maybe knew about it, but like, or at least that we know that he knew. But
All I'm saying
it was,
for is if you want to find a more natural way to create a rift between Kratos and Loki, that's it.
Mm.
yeah, maybe. Um, yeah. I mean, I don't think that they. Well, okay, we'll
Yeah,
double
we're,
back to
we're
this.
really going off into the mask.
Yeah.
Let's just finish the ending of the game. Yeah.
Point being though, okay, and I did like this little twist in the story that the Atreus actually winds up destroying the mask, saying it's not worth it looking into that thing with this mask, like it's not worth potentially giving Odin what he wants, and it's just not like this is how we change what's to come, and he winds up destroying it, and like that both kind of like further invalidates like the whole purpose of that whole damn storyline, but I do weirdly admittedly kind of like it.
It
Yeah,
was from the emotional lens, it was good. From like a story lens, like I guess logical lens, it's like okay, we saw nothing of the mask, but you know, it went nowhere basically.
Yeah.
Um, but Loki came out of it, and Kratos came out of it. A better father and son, where he trusts Loki now, or Atreus now. You know, that was the purpose of
yeah,
it.
yeah. It was really more for the character and setting up the stark contrast where Loki has learned his lesson about, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, whereas Odin has not and will not. He refuses to stop his pursuit of knowledge.
Yeah. Um. So Atreus then proceeds to trap Odin into one of the giant stones. They contemplate for
The
about 20
Pokeballs,
seconds. Huh?
Pokeballs.
Yeah, the Norse Pokeballs. That's right. Damn it. Shit. Why?
Atreus is literally going on an adventure to catch them all. There's 150 giants out there. He's got to find them all.
Oh my god, that's the next God of War game. That's it. It's perfect.
Oh,
That's the
I hope it
first thing I thought when Angerboda pulled that out. I'm like, no. Oh
I
god.
hope I hope it runs better than the latest one.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
Anyway,
true.
topical humor. Um they contemplate what to do with this stone for all of 20 seconds, and then Sindri comes in clutch and destroys it.
Yeah, like
Um
well, they were talking about like, oh, should let's give it. They gave it to Freya because they know she had like she wanted revenge on him, and she
yeah.
decided, I'm over it. Like everyone has moved past their
Yeah.
path of vengeance except for Sindri at
Sindri.
this point.
Which, in and of itself, I like Sindri MVP, my man. Like, you
Yeah.
started this whole fucking thing to go to Ragnarok. I know you didn't want it. It's like Jon Snow and fucking end of Game of Thrones. I don't want it. I don't want it. And like, I know you didn't want this war. I know you didn't want it, but you're fucking here now. You're gonna do Ragnarok. Just kill Odin in a fucking gratuitous, gory way. Like, I know it goes against what the fucking not themes, but the image they want for the new God of War. But it would have been so much more satisfying. I don't know.
Yeah, well, well, at least for Sindri,
I like that
I
Sindri
mean,
does it. It's the best part of that sequence.
no, yeah, it was shocking. Just pretty much just echoing Sindri's whole character arc in the latter half of this game. It was just completely shocking to see that he just grabbed it, smashed it, and then left.
Hmm.
That was
And
so gangsta. Like I don't know any other word to describe it.
You know, Sindri
and
has some of the best character development in the fucking game.
Yeah, Sindri's
I don't know about the
awesome.
best character
No,
development.
some of, like not
Maybe I would argue some of the best character deconstruction.
maybe. Yeah, maybe that's a
Because
better way to
yeah,
put it.
because like Sindri doesn't really develop. He really changes in some really dark
Yeah, he
ways.
unravels, I guess you could say. Like,
Yeah, that's why I say
yeah,
deconstruction
yeah.
is like, yeah, we know Sindri for an entire game and a half as this, kind of paranoid, um like
Anxious,
anxious germaphobe.
germaphobe.
Yeah, like he is like he wants to help Atreus, but he's very nervous for him. He's very protective of him, and he's also got this. He's got this thing that he's kind of kept from Brock about Brock having died before, and he was able to bring him back. But like, if he
Not
dies
whole.
again, he's gone,
Yeah, he's missing part of his soul. Yeah.
and Brock dies.
Yeah, you could basically look at
Um,
it like from a Freudian perspective. Like he, over the course of the game, his inner beast, his shadow, gets released.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. For that's a good, decent way of
Or
looking
not
at it.
Freudian,
Yeah.
Jungian. I guess that'd be Jung. I don't know.
Um. We'll circle back to Sindri because there's other layers that we have to peel back before we really talked about that. There's another specific character we really have to dig into.
Hmm.
Um. So let's finish up the ending. We have after Sindri destroys the stone containing Odin's soul, Surtur, being a giant fire beast that helps Ragnarok happen, but he's just destroying Asgard. Freyr winds up sacrificing himself. How'd you guys feel about that?
At this point of the game, I wasn't like I didn't. Freyr wasn't my favorite character, and we just got to know him like a few chapters ago.
feel like they
Yeah.
And
needed
I
more
feel
time with
like
him to make that more
Yeah,
impactful.
right,
he
exactly.
has a grand total of like under 2 minutes of screen time. I feel like throughout this entire
Yeah.
journey.
It's more than that, but
I'm
I take
I'm
your
being
point. I
somewhat
take your point.
hyperbolic.
Yeah.
And I
It's
won't like dig too deep into it, but we learn more about him in the post game optional quest than we do in the main game, which is rewarding to actually do those things. But at the same time, it's like when in that impactful moment where he sacrifices himself for everyone, it's like, oh, okay. Whereas when Brock died, it was like tears flowing. Like I was
Yeah.
crying when Brock died. Like I was
yeah,
like, oh shit. Like we
yeah.
knew Brock for a whole game.
He was the first
eh,
character we met outside of Boulder. Was Brock.
Right. Yeah.
We have spent more time with Brock to that point than any other character in the game, which is why that worked.
And he's just, even if I spent 10 minutes with Brock, he's more likable, in my opinion, than Freyr.
Um, IGN's podcast Beyond, that's their PlayStation podcast. They did a spoiler cast with Eric Williams. He actually mentioned, this is how I knew what you were talking about before, of the things that Corey told him have to be in the game, and one of the things was Brock dying. And Corey asked him, you know why Brock has to die, right? And he said, yeah, he's the family dog. And I'm like, damn, that's fucking sad.
Yeah.
It was a decent conversation. I'd recommend giving it a listen if you're interested more in this game. It's a far, don't get me wrong, it's a far inferior spoiler cast than theirs. Most spoiler casts are, let's be honest. Anyway, yeah, Freyr definitely needed to have more involvement in the game to have that sacrifice be. Even Freya doesn't seem to mourn him too
I
much.
was just going to say, like, it would have been more impactful if it would have had an actual influence on Freya, but she's been on, like, this kick where, like, you know, she's over Odin, she's over Kratos killing her son.
Yeah, I don't
Now
want
she's over her brother dying. So I don't know.
I
I
want
thought
to
it was
wait to
going to
get
have more of an impact.
yeah, I want to wait to get into Freya because Freya that's a whole nother story, and that
Yeah,
does
we
tie
will
into
talk about that.
Freya. Yeah,
Yeah. Um okay. The last thing here, you do this whole sequence with Atreus waking up and talking to everybody, eventually makes his way to the top of the base that they have in Midgard, uh runs into Angerboda, runs into Kratos, they have a touching reunion, and Angerboda shows them a shrine, a hidden shrine, a
Hmm.
shrine that was destroyed by Fae, and it was the shrine that would have told them how things were, I guess, supposed to end.
Hmm.
Um, but she deliberately destroyed it so that they would forge their own path, their own or their own ending. You know, have them forge their own conclusion to this tale.
which Faye predicted exactly the events that happened in the game.
Yeah,
Obviously, the future. There's a hint at what the future is for him, and
yeah.
the reason I bring that up that she specifically is because of the issue with I have with prophecy in this game. I don't know if we want to talk about that now or wait until we're finally done
We
with everything.
can, yeah. We can. I mean,
So
let's also just bring up that she predicted and set them on the path through the entirety of 2018
Yeah, that was like a huge
yeah,
ending
reveal.
conversation point. Yeah.
well, yes, but the prophecy that we saw then was the first of multiple prophecies in this game, which turned out not to come true.
Well, no. Well, the majority of what we saw at the
Yeah,
end of 2018 was their journey to Jotunheim. There was just that one mural
Mm.
that was kind of a kickoff point for this game that didn't come true.
but isn't
Yeah.
it implied in the end that that was a prophecy made by the other giants, and Faye went against them by making another prophecy?
I do believe so. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is where I guess we can talk about what's called the prophecy paradox, which is similar
Sure.
to the time traveler. You guys are familiar with the time traveler's dilemma in
No.
Yeah.
storytelling, where basically because time like there are actual debates about what the real world rules of time travel would be, that like if you're writing a story about time travel you basically have to choose from like three pretty well accepted means. I don't want to get too deep in that. The point is that when it comes to stories about prophecies, you really have one of two choices: either the prophecy is real and is a main source of drama and eventually comes true, even if it's not exactly the same way it comes true. Sometimes it's referred to as destiny. So, like, for Witcher fans that might be listening, the sword of destiny has ultimately the character reaches that destiny, and a lot of the story is them grappling with that dread, and having moral conundrums. The other way you can do it is just they defy prophecy. The Final Fantasy way of doing it, they defy prophecy,
Yeah.
and none of it matters. But
Mhm.
it's more about, prophecy does matter. It's the choices you make, and this game mostly does that up until it doesn't, which is at the end. It's revealed that uh, Faye actually had a completely different prophecy. So there was a third prophecy. There was the original giant prophecy that was a lie to Odin. Then there was the real giant prophecy that we saw in Jotunheim, and then there was Faye's alternative prophecy.
Mhm.
And this is after learning from the Norns that apparently prophecy isn't actually a thing. You're just reading people and predicting very accurately what they'll do based on their personality.
Mhm.
But then so that's fine if you want to go with the route of, okay, prophecy doesn't really matter so much as the choices you make. But at the end, it's revealed that everything that just happened in the game was a prophecy made by Faye, and we just didn't know it. So one of the primary sources of drama in this game is prophecy and characters grappling with the imminent doom they're facing. And then a big arc of the game is saying no to that and breaking free and making your own choices. But at the very end, it's the rug is pulled out from under you, and you realize that the whole thing was a prophecy anyway, made
Hmm.
by Faye.
Yeah.
It was the third prophecy.
But she didn't
Which,
want you to know. Well, she
well,
didn't want Kratos and
this
Atreus to
this
know.
opens a whole new Pandora's box. It's funny I said that, given this we're talking about
Yeah.
God of War. It opens a whole nother Pandora's box of the Norns say prophecy isn't real and it's just about reading people. Yet apparently Faye, a giant, knew, and the giants in general, including Angrboda, know about prophecy because they make them and they can see visions of the future. So apparently, it's not just the Norns. The Norns say the prophecy isn't real, but the giants believe in prophecy. Angrboda believes in prophecy. She's willing to, carry out this original prophecy, not the one Faye made. It's just it gets very confusing what exactly the rules of prophecy,
For
and it
sure.
completely undermines a primary source of drama retroactively for the entire story.
Yeah, but I don't think most of that was even considered. I think it was
It wasn't. The actual mechanics of the plot weren't considered. They were focused on the characters, which I
Yes.
can understand, but it really starts to build up over the course of this game.
the
This isn't
the
the only thing.
characters, and I would say like the shock and awe, like, oh, it was prophesized all along. But like, it's like one of those things where it's interesting and shocking for all of 5 seconds until you start to think about it too much, which clearly Jason has.
Well, it's
And
just
like
because, like,
to it,
I love prophecy story. Like,
yeah.
this is once again I'm going to bring up Elric on the podcast. Like, Elric
Oh,
is a
here we
Destiny 5,
go.
and The Witcher is because The Witcher is just a ripoff of Elric. But that's a whole nother podcast to have. But his destiny does happen. It's about how he grapples with that because, as tons of historians will point out, across history, mythologies constantly focus on prophecy, Greek mythologies, what have you, because it's basically just a metaphor, so to speak, for the inevitability of death and
Hmm.
how human beings deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, prophecy really had to play a big role in this game, in this storyline, no matter what, because the prophecy of Ragnarok is known to all of them. They know what's coming, um even in the original myths, and it's basically all just very cyclical.
Hmm.
um that was always going to be a major plot point. I do think that the execution of it here, as not only a major plot point and theme for the overall setting, but a big plot point and theme for our main characters. Yeah, it does get a little messy,
Yeah.
and very very heavy handed.
Hmm.
Overall, all the themes in this game are super heavy handed. We'll talk about that in a
Be
little
better.
bit, but
Yeah, basically.
Which
just the
sucks
amount.
because, and I know it sounds like and I'm putting a lot of this up front because there are some points of this game that I do really want to praise.
Oh yeah, me too.
Um, it's just
But
it gets so bogged down.
take a
Continue
take a shot every time someone says the word trust,
or be
and
better.
you will just be trashed in 10 minutes.
And this is why
Yeah.
in the beginning I brought up how the amount of writers increased almost like threefold.
Yeah.
Because this game really made me appreciate the focus and clarity of what was going on in 2018.
Hmm.
I would ultimately argue it's the better story. Um, but let's finish with
Yeah, we still got a few more things to say
yeah.
about the ending.
Well, the one
So
good thing to come out of that new prophecy is that it was like the first time, well, maybe the second time in the game where Kratos looked like he was gonna cry. And that
yeah.
was really cool. And the way they did it, he didn't actually cry, but like he had a
Well,
face like he was holding it back.
you're talking
Yeah,
about the second part of the prophecy, right?
which is that he become
The
beloved.
at the very end.
Which
Yeah.
we haven't even brought up was, so after they see the first part, Atreus tells Kratos, I have to go and find the rest of the giants. You can't come with me. I have to do this myself.
Peace out, Dad. I gotta catch them all.
And this is kind of the Jesus Christ. This is kind of the culmination of their relationship where there's this whole build up throughout the game of them. They need to come to trust each other. They need
Just yeah.
to yeah, it's very heavy handed, like I said. And this is the culmination of that. Atreus says, Dad, I have to go. I have to do this myself. And Kratos says, okay, go. That's fine. And it is a really heartfelt moment.
Mhm.
And then Kratos realizes the other side of that shrine has yet another prophecy. And this is another thing where it's like it's brought up in dialogue, not in a cutscene, just like while you're out running around and exploring and playing the game and stuff. It's brought up just in casual conversation, I think, with Freya or somebody, I don't even remember, where they talk about how Kratos was the god of war in the Greek pantheon after he killed Ares. Um, but he was never a god that was war. Oh, I think Odin brings it up to him.
Yes, and I hate that
Oh,
line of dialogue because it's not
what?
true.
Where
If you play the original trilogy,
it kind of no,
the
it kind of
Spartans,
is true.
God of War 2 opens with the part with the Spartans praying to Kratos to come help him.
But that doesn't mean they respect or revere him.
I mean, okay, if you want to split hairs, sure.
Yeah, that just means he's the god of fucking war. Like they're the Spartans were constantly at war. Like them praying to him doesn't mean they revere him. That just means that they want
Okay, if
his
you want to
help
be
in
technical,
war.
sure, sure.
Yeah, but like no one ever. Let's put it this way: no one in Greek mythology in this game in this series' continuity respected or viewed Kratos in the same way that anyone in this Norse continuity respects someone like Tyr, where Tyr was a god of war that used it for peace, and he did not wage war haphazardly. He did not encourage people to even go and fight each other. He was a very different god, really a great foil to Kratos in that respect. At least the past Kratos. So
Keyword
that's
was a
kind
great
of
foil, or I guess in the post
what's
game era.
that?
But as a keyword was a great foil, but I guess I
Well,
have to
it's
take that back
still
because of the post
still
game. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, still is a great foil to Kratos. But like no one from Greece uh revered Kratos. No one from Greece respected Kratos. They just, you know, they prayed to him when they needed him in war. And
I get
he
your
opens
point.
up the
Yeah,
shrine. Yeah, he opens up the shrine to find people revering him, praising him, respecting him, and loving him. And that's a very different feeling for him. That was like a really good emotional moment. He did. It's. I feel like it's something Kratos never really realized he wanted until he finally got it,
Mhm.
mm.
and he's seeing that that's what's going to happen. That's his future, and
I don't even
he's
yeah. I was just gonna add, I don't even think it's more so that he didn't want it, but more that he didn't believe it was possible based on all
yeah.
the shit he did.
Mm-hmm. So all you have to do is go to a place where no one really knows who you are except for bodiless goat man, and you're all set. You're free and clear. But I do think this conclusion for Kratos' story is, assuming this is the conclusion to Kratos' story, and we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. This is a perfect conclusion to his story, to his arc. The only thing I'll say about Kratos' character is a lot of it has to do with Faye, and this is something I really want to talk about if you guys feel we're ready to talk about some stuff that's not part of the core ending.
Sure.
Is there anything else you guys wanted to bring up about the core ending before we move on to some other things?
Yeah, I guess I just want to say the way they ended it was very open ended, right? It wasn't like 2018 where they had this big freaking reveal at the end where like Thor shows up, and once again very Marvel. Um, you see like the Mjolnir and the electricity, and then it ends, and it's like, oh, what's gonna happen next? Whereas in this game, there's so many plots and stories that are left open that I'm sure we're gonna get into that aren't explored until the end game, and some of them just unexplored. Period.
Right. Like the
And
big one is the horn from 18 with Jormungandr. Who
mhm.
blew the horn is kind of one of the big questions floating around, and I think Corey Balrog or somebody from Sony Santa Monica said that's a question for another game, which is like, I thought this was the last Norse game. Like,
There's a lot left unanswered, and there's also a lot that you just don't know about what happens next for characters unless you do optional things, which I encourage. But it made me feel like at first I was like, damn, like I wanted. I knew it was like an ending, so it was kind of like a happy ending. But I just felt like there was so much more that I wanted. There left more to be desired. But then the more that I played the game, and then the more that I sat with that ending, the more I appreciated it. And I wonder if they are going to continue at this point, which I know we're going to get into at the end of the podcast. But I didn't feel satisfied with the ending
right.
until I kept playing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because and I gave you guys a fair warning ahead of time, like you should go do this and this after you beat it, because there's some really important epilogue shit for a lot of the characters that I feel no one should miss. But
Yeah.
it's really easily missable if you walk down the hill while the credits are popping up on screen. Again, they did that. Re-listening to some of our 2018 episode, or our episode on God of War 2018, Delilah, you praised the credits popping up while you're still like walking down the mountain, and they did that again this time, and we
Yeah.
still thought it was great here. We thought it
Totally.
was great then. Um, but like you could turn off the console and not never go back and see like some of the epilogue things, like the Aesir and Vanir, the remaining Aesir and Vanir coexisting, Sif and Hildisvini in Vanaheim trying to figure out what they can do with the realm to for them to coexist and survive and thrive.
Yeah. Thrud
um
wielding Mjolnir. She got
yeah.
fucking whacked all the way to, was it Midgard, right? That you find her?
Alfheim.
It was Alfheim.
Alfheim.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Thrud is now the new the new wielder of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. And you don't like get to interact with her, you just see her with the hammer, and she, flies up and leaves and disappears. Um who is it? Lunda, I think, gives you that hint, like, hey, there's something in Alfheim you might want to go see.
Yeah.
And then after that happens, you can go over to Luna. She'll be like, "Told you you'd want to see that. Isn't that crazy?" It's like,
Yeah.
okay, thanks.
There's so much, and then of course the most important thing, like Brock and Sindri's
Yeah,
the funeral for Brock,
and
which rolls a second set of credits.
yeah, the primary credits, I would say,
Yeah.
like the actual credit sequence, and we'll talk about that in another post game side quest soon. Yeah, I want to talk about how Faye uh kind of fits into this game and Kratos' development, and how I feel there's kind of a massive gap missing in his development that just doesn't really make any sense.
Okay.
Um,
Well, when you say gap, can you elaborate what you're talking about?
well, so the end of God of War 3, Kratos first of all kills all of Greece, right? Like the Greece pantheon is done. Greece is like in ruins, and he stabs himself with the blade of Olympus, seemingly killing himself, but then we get the cliffhanger that he actually crawled away and survived, and that's how he reaches the Norse mythology in 2018. And 2018 immediately springs us into he's a dad and his wife just died and they have to take her ashes to Jotunheim, and he's learning how to be a father and actually be somewhat sympathetic while also raising a son. And then we get to this game where Kratos is even more sympathetic and he's getting older and is much more caring and is still trying to control his anger and stuff. And like the progression from God of War 2018 to this game mostly makes sense for his character. We get glimpses in this game of his relationship with Faye. I don't feel like we get the right glimpses.
Can I bring something up real quick?
Yeah.
So, and I guess this will be, you guys already know, but this will be news to those that are listening. I read leaks, and these aren't like the gameplay
Oh
straight
yes,
up
the
from
leaks.
when the street date broke. I read leaks from Reddit a few months back prior to release that everybody had kind of dismissed as, you know, being crazy, and a lot of it didn't come true, but and a lot of things changed, but still happened the same way, but with different characters. And a lot of the gameplay segments happened in the exact order, and even down to specific encounters, which leads me to believe that it was probably like an earlier draft, maybe somebody who left and was pissed off, so this they leaked an earlier draft. So I do think
Okay.
there was some validity to it. And in those leaks, one of the boss fights in the game was the first time Kratos meets Faye, and they fight, and you learn how they fell in love. Yeah,
That is what this game that's what his character progression is missing, in my opinion. And that's what kind of drives me crazy about this progression, not from 2018 to Ragnarok, but from God of War 3 to God of War 2018. Kratos is such a different character, and like that's fine. He can change. He like that's kind of why he came there to begin with, to get away from his past and ultimately get another family to maybe grow from that experience. They needed to show some relationship between him and Faye, but they didn't show the right parts of it. They showed some walking through the woods before Atreus was born, I think. And then some of Atreus being a little baby, and then the
marking the
one the
trees.
the one that's the one thing that I liked about the glimpses with Faye, the dream sequences, was the part where they were setting up the paint on the trees. It's the only flashback that I thought was fitting and well placed in the game. The others were needless. We needed to see them meeting. I feel like that should have been the first dream we got. And there should have been a parallel storyline that was a past storyline showing the progression of their relationship, showing Kratos grow as a person. Because like we got the growth of him being kind of an aloof, like non-existent father in 2018 to becoming the person he is at the end of that game. But we don't really see what happens before that and in between God of War 3 and God of War 2018. And I feel like we're kind of just told to take a lot of things for granted with his character development, and it just kind of doesn't make any sense.
I actually don't think that the points that Faye was a part of Kratos' life, that he was this character. I think this character happened between the ending of God of War 2018 and now, where he's raising Atreus alone. I don't really think there was like, okay, so you're saying it based off the dream sequences, like with him like holding Atreus as a baby and stuff like that. Kratos was still kind of silent and not very like tender and like talk, like he's not talkative but more talkative than he ever was. So
Yeah.
I actually think that Kratos was still this like unemotional rock that couldn't be broken even by Faye. Like I'm sure she started that journey, but I don't really think that he became who he was now until the end of
No,
2018.
I agree with that, and I see what you're saying. My point though is just that even Kratos at the beginning of 2018, where we do see like parts of in those flashbacks with Faye, where he's very quiet, he's kind of emotionally unavailable and stuff like that. is all there, but that's still a very different character than how he is when God of War 3 ends. And like
Right.
going from that point to the point where we begin 2018 at, or even in those flashbacks, it just doesn't make sense. And I feel like showing how him and Faye met, especially because they talk about it, like they mentioned that they were about to kill each other when they met. That is brought up. Like, don't talk about it. If you're gonna do flashbacks with Faye, show that one. That's
Yeah.
like the best one to show.
Yeah, that would have been
But
really cool to see for sure.
and I feel like it would have been the most useful thing they could have done with her in this game. You know, if you're actually gonna show Faye, show the right moments with Faye. And I don't really feel like they did. I feel like they incorporated her into the story uh in all the wrong ways, at least when they actually showed her in these flashback sequences. And I
Which
feel like,
sucks because I love the actress who plays her, and it looks again. I'll keep bringing this up and over because it's one of the great praises I have for this game is the motion capture and acting, both voice acting and physical
oh yeah,
acting.
yeah.
But like I knew who the actress was right away. She's from Daredevil. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah.
but and same with Ryan Hurst and same with a bunch of other people. But yeah, it's a shame that I agree that the character feels ultimately wasted, as do many characters in this game. Um, because again, a great actress and there's great potential there, like you said. Like I was expecting to fight her and learn how, like, not just go through like, oh, they've already fallen in love. It's already after Kratos has been tamed, quote unquote.
Yeah, well,
Um,
that's kind of my thing. Is I can't imagine the Kratos that walks away from God of War 3 alive, just going to another land and falling in love with someone,
mhm.
and then them dying and him having to raise a son. Like, it just doesn't connect. I,
It feels very similar to in 2018. Like there's the build up to fighting Hraesvelgr, and it just doesn't happen. You get a troll, and the reason for that was they ran out of money, um, quote unquote. That's at least the reason given. It feels like that, almost like those flashbacks were building to something, but they ran out of money.
Hmm. I mean, I don't know how relevant this is, but the comic books that were, I think, supposed to take place between God of War 3 and
yeah.
2018, which
Uh-huh.
weren't good, I know.
No.
But
Yeah,
they just
I've
showed like a very like defeated Kratos,
Yeah.
who like was trying his best to just die. So I assume like that he was away from like the rage, the killing, like he just was defeated, and then maybe his life that happened here with Faye or whoever else he met before her was assumed to be something revitalizing, I guess. So
yeah.
he didn't go from like kill, kill, kill to soft, nice guy. You
Well,
know, it was
Yeah.
like a
My
defeated moment in
it's
between.
important.
my
It's
only
important.
issue with
Oh, could I just bring
go
up something
ahead, go
real quick?
ahead, go ahead.
It's
Go
important
ahead.
to remember that at the ending of God of War 3, the actual the actual context of that was that the sword of Olympus was imbued with the power of hope, and Athena wanted him to stab her to give her the ultimate power over people. And Kratos, who doesn't realize what he's doing to Greece until like towards the end of the game, suddenly realizes, what it is he's destroying by killing the gods. He's destroying Greece. So by killing himself with that sword, the idea is that he's giving the power of hope to the people of Greece as
Yes.
some minor form of redemption. So it's not like he's just a complete monster and just kills himself when
No, yeah, I
yeah.
know, but like, still, you get my point. Is It's
Yeah, it
even
would have
though he
been
does
cool
try
to
to
see
see,
it.
yeah, he like, even if at the end of God of War 3 he was trying to find some sort of personal redemption, like he still murdered every god in the Greek
Yeah.
pantheon.
It's it's
He
it's
still did some really fucked up
it's
things.
not a huge thing, but the idea is supposed to be at least he can do that one small thing, deny Athena her play for power and give the power of hope to the people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's still a very different character. And like Delilah, I know what you're saying about those comics. Like, he was very much like, if from what I remember of that whole 4-issue run, was like he was trying to get rid of the Blades of Chaos and they kept coming back to him, reappearing in his hands. No matter what he did, he couldn't let go of his past. In all fairness, you and I are just total giant nerds that went out of our way to get those
Yeah, I'm
comics.
not like justifying it by saying that, but
I'm sure like
yeah.
99% of the people that are listening to this podcast didn't even know those comics existed.
Yeah,
They
totally.
had
And
no idea.
a lot of games do that, or
Mhm.
other forms of media. But
Yeah.
I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you.
No, that and that's fine. Like, I get what you're saying about those comics. I get what you're saying. He there is some point in between those games where he is feeling defeated. It's just it's it's such a weird progression for him to just go to a new land and fall in love with someone else, and it just he's just toggles a switch. Okay, I'm a totally different character now. Um, and for them to, I kind of just accepted it, took it for granted in 2018. But if you're gonna show flashbacks with Faye, like, this is your opportunity to show how he's grown and changed as a person, and they just didn't do that.
I also, and this like kind of ties into a theory. I also think that, well, it's a theory that's kind of like explained in the end game, but like I think Faye was also a rageful human being. And so I feel like it wasn't just like, oh, she was what made him start softening up. I think that he like maybe didn't see her in him, but she was a lot like him, even though he didn't quite
If
see it.
if you do the side content there, and I see a lot of Witcher 3 syndrome in this game, where the side content ends up being more interesting than the core plot itself. One of the major themes of the
Some
side
of it,
content,
not all of it.
not all of it, but some of the stories, like Freya's side quest story, is much better than her entire arc and the entire main story. Um, but anyway, with regards to what you were just saying about Faye, it's heavily hinted at that she has a dark past, and it's parallel with Mimir's relationship with Sigurun,
Yeah.
and the past that she didn't know about when he had it. It's heavily implicated that she might have even had some sort of relationship with Thor. Like
I
when you learn those
actually
stories from Van, you could draw that conclusion. You can draw many other conclusions.
Yeah, I don't view it so much as a relationship, so much as just more a rivalry, if anything.
Yeah, maybe.
If it were even that far.
Go
I
ahead.
actually had a theory throughout the game, and I'll explain why. And I'm glad we're talking about Faye because she's the character that I have the most theories about. I think that either this is crazy. All right, bear with me. Either Odin and Faye had a relationship, and Atreus is actually Odin's son,
Ooh, I don't know.
or
Well, Odin
he
does bring it
like
up.
he like right he refers to Atreus as our son when he
Yeah.
talks to Kratos. And there's many other reasons like Brock saying, "Oh, yeah, everything about Faye is amazing except her taste in men." Not in a man.
Mm,
Like I you can take that as like a jab to Kratos, but it felt deeper than that. And they also flashbacked to that exact statement and didn't really explain why they flashbacked to Brock saying that. Um, Also, in the beginning, there's a lot of Kratos saying like, "Oh, Faye's like hiding a lot. I never asked her questions. There's things that I just let her be, let her do." And then Atreus was like, "Yeah, well, I guess we'll never know now." And if you look at our Odin, I'm sorry, Atreus and Odin next to each other, they look alike a lot. Like their eyes are like practically the same. Which like Faye kind of has the same eyes, and Faye kind of looks similar to like Thrud and Sif as well. So there could be like some weird stuff there, but if it's not that they had like a genuine relationship, I imagine that maybe Odin could have like shapeshifted into Kratos and like tricked her into like having his baby or some weird shit. I
mm.
don't know if they'll ever like go down that route of exploring that, but there was just too much in the game that made me feel like like there's something with Faye and Odin and Thor
You
and
see,
Asgard.
I
There's a lot of side, both in the main plot cutscenes and in the side dialogue on side quests when you're just exploring the world. There's a lot of dialogue like that that seems to be setting stuff up that just never really gets paid off and just leaves it as an
Right.
open question. Like they talk about time travel a lot, and going back to those leaks I read, time travel was a part of that. And they talk about time travel a lot when you're exploring the world. They talk about
Yeah.
Kratos' past with
well,
the Fates, and
yeah, because Kratos did time travel in the
yeah,
original
exactly.
trilogy,
So,
so
like, there are a lot of threads that are brought up in these side conversations that just never go anywhere, which almost makes it seem like they didn't know what direction they wanted to go in. And then the ending just feels so kind of rushed and matter of fact.
yeah.
Yeah.
Delilah, I hate your theory, but I got to admit there's some merit to it, and
Thank you.
I don't like that there's merit to it. I
I
don't like
know.
it, but
Yeah. It's and it just like as the game progresses, especially towards the end, where like you find out that yeah, these fucking realms, they all meld in my head. Vanaheim, you see like there's another like bolt, a frozen bolt,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, me and Thor didn't do that, meaning Kratos and Thor didn't cause that like they did it in Midgard.
Mhm.
But who did that? And then you find out later that it was a battle between Faye and Thor. And I'm like, well, what the hell is happening? Like they were having drinks together when you do the missions with the wayward spirits. They tell you like basically that they were like drinking together and hanging out, and then all of a sudden a big battle happened or something.
Mhm.
So it's like there's so much about Faye that's just a mystery. That I think even Kratos doesn't know and that Atreus doesn't know. And I feel like it's going to come to a head in later games. But when they're saying that this is the end, I'm wondering like,
Well,
how
it's
or
the
why.
end. It's like the end of, it's so weird because it's the end of this Norse saga, but like they're now so embedded in the mythology within this continuity that like going to another mythology just would not make sense to me.
It would make it messier.
Like they only managed, and that's because the transition from God of War, from the Greek saga to the Norse saga, like the only commonality there was Kratos,
Mm.
because
Right.
Kratos leaves the Greek pantheon, the Greek continuity, completely in shambles. He's basically the only one left standing in general. No one else could go with him. This time it's very much different. He's not murdering everybody. He's only murdering who he needs to.
Yeah.
And the majority of people are still alive, so it's like, including his son, who is one of the most important Norse figures in all of that mythology. So it's like, how do they move on to? Apparently, they already have the next mythologies like set like in mind, and I'm just like, well, where the hell could you go? Because like so many of these Norse figures still exist with unresolved plot threads,
Yeah,
including
exactly.
the one that we should probably talk about next.
Well, right before we do that, I'll just insert here, and we talked about a bit of this off air. My hot take that this should have been broken into two games
Uh-huh.
to fully explore it. Because contrast 2018, where they had the restraint to leave you with like a handful of characters, and you didn't even touch on Thor or Odin in those games, as opposed to Ragnarok, where you have all this stuff shoved in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. Definitely a lot. And like I get it. Like they want to focus on Kratos and Atreus. Like this is about Kratos' journey. Like this game tugs at my heartstrings because like I've known Kratos since like 2005. You know what I mean? So to see him come to this, like that's what they wanted me to feel. They wanted me to feel like his growth and you know how far he's come and all that stuff, and the redemption that he has with his current son. Um, prior instead of what happened with his daughter, Calliope. So it's like, you know, I get what they're going for, but then all these other characters, a lot of freaking characters coming into play in Ragnarok specifically. Forget about the people that we already knew in 2018. They all just seem to have such relevance to like what's happening for
Yeah.
Kratos' past, but we just don't know what it is. It's such a mystery that all I could do is theorize and yeah, I wish like uh, I wish they wouldn't say that this is the end because it doesn't feel like it. And
Mm-hmm.
what that means, sure, you know, that's fine. But, you know, I just feel like there's so much more to explore and unpack. And some of that is already unpacked in the end game stuff. And yet there's still more. It makes you only want more. So it's messy, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
it wasn't the
Very.
point of the game. You know, I get the
Yeah.
point of the
Yeah.
game. And they definitely settled that at least, you know, Kratos' growth.
Mm-hmm. Um, let's talk a little bit about Atreus. I feel like Atreus, like his arc was very focused on like finding what his purpose was, finding what he needed to do. He was very hung up on all the prophecy, and both trying to break it but really trying to fulfill it as well. Um how did you feel about his arc and how that kind of played out?
Well, I just want to say I assumed that Atreus was going to be like some whiny teenager, and I actually wound up liking him a lot
No,
more than I thought.
he did not go through that whole phase again, thank
Thank
God.
goodness. I really thought that based on the trailers, it seemed like they might have been going that direction, but he was actually like super awesome. Like I really, really liked Atreus. The whole like him trying to find himself makes total sense. And I
Mhm.
think the way they executed it, especially in facial animations with like kind of his mischievous nature,
Yeah.
was done so well. Like his shifty eyes when you know he was lying, like that you didn't know he was lying, but based on his eye movement, you could tell he was
Yeah.
Atreus was kind of lying, and you definitely saw that like he was not just going to follow the steps of his father and like just listen to everything that Kratos tells him. He wanted to pave his own path, and I thought that was good. Like I'm glad that it wasn't just like, boy, you do what I say and then it happens. Like but it also didn't end up in like a major fight between them, which is also good because that would have been,
Right.
I don't know, maybe predictable.
And well, I mean, like not a literal like boss battle fight, but they do. There is tension there where that's what inevitably leads him to go finally go to Asgard. Although I did find it a little weird and funny. Like they accuse him of going to Asgard, and he's like, "I didn't go to Asgard. I'm gonna go to Asgard."
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, so to get back at them for what they accused you of doing, you're gonna do exactly what they accused
Right.
you of doing.
Like, bro, run back to Jotunheim and chill with Angerboda. Like,
That
don't
is
like
Yeah, that's the most predictable teenage thing I guess he could have done in this game, but it's just like it was an interesting dichotomy of like his rebellious teenage phase instead of being something more akin to like what it was in 2018 where he just became a conniving little shit. Um Instead he it was just frustration with inaction, right? Like
yeah.
Kratos was just like, no, we just need to survive and thrive and move on our own. And Atreus is like, no, like we gotta do something. Like stuff
Yeah.
is it is a never ending winter here, and we gotta figure out what our role is in all this, man. Like come on, let's get to it.
Yeah.
um I We got to talk about the Jotunheim section.
That was boring
Um,
as fuck
that
Yep.
was so boring.
and long.
Like
Yep.
it was necessary. They had to give a meaningful introduction to Angerboda. What I don't think was necessary was it taking like 3 hours and taking the pacing and just screeching it to a halt.
Yeah.
um that whole time I was just like, when the fuck is the and I don't know about you guys, I did not find Atreus to be particularly fun to play as.
No.
I actually enjoyed him. I enjoyed the difference. I felt like his archery felt better than Aloy's. Not trying to like take a jab at that game, but it just
Well,
felt more like intuitive and like I don't know. I'm impressed actually. I'll say because it's not they had a completely different gameplay a combat type.
yeah.
You're an archer, but it felt as intuitive as when you were playing as Kratos. Like the button scheme was kind of similar.
Yeah, like I'm not saying it was bad. It's just like if we're going to compare the two, Kratos is much more fun to play as than Atreus is. Also, it's really funny that you bring up that you liked his combat better than Aloy's, which I would agree. And it's kind of funny that when you're playing as Atreus, all of a sudden all those pesky RPG mechanics just go right out the window.
I wish
Um,
they would have gone out the window for Kratos too, but
we'll talk about that later because oh god. Can you imagine how much more stuff they could have fit in this game if they just got rid of
yes.
all of that stuff?
I can't wait to talk
Anyway,
about it.
yeah. But yeah, like I didn't find Atreus to be particularly fun to play as, so like having like a 3 hour stretch in Jotunheim where you're doing combat with him, but you're also just like riding a yak and picking apples and fucking whatever else you were doing, picking mushrooms off of bark and you know, I don't skipping rocks.
Yeah.
The most interesting part of that was going to Gryla's house,
Hmm.
and like that was it, man. And like I said, it was necessary because they had to build the relationship between him and Angrboda. Obviously, she's his love interest,
Yeah.
much more than Thrud is, because Loki and Angrboda actually do have children together in Norse myth. So it's like, well, they got to build up that relationship a little bit. But
Yeah.
man, just what a slog to get through that
Yeah.
second.
Like Jala's adorable, but she's way too slow. And yeah, they could have definitely established that relationship in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah.
Which by the way, Gryla was also a really cool boss fight. I
Hmm.
enjoyed that one.
Yes, that was a cool creative boss fight for sure. Again, another boss fight where you had to do more than just attack.
Yeah.
Um,
But then it just kind of ends up nowhere. Like, you know, the events happen. It's like a sudden dramatic moment where Gryla says some hurtful things,
and she's
and
never brought
then
up again.
and it's never brought up again. And then all of a sudden, there's this tonal whiplash where, oh, let's have a race. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like
The race
you
didn't
brought up,
bother me so much.
but you brought up and foreshadowed, you know, these potential like deeper. I don't know what the word you want to use is effects. These deeper implications of the things that Gryla is saying, and it just never gets brought up again.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of left there. And then Angrboda pops in here and there as a Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, I assumed and theorized, and once again, this is all I do in this game because they don't really tie ends, is that Gryla, yeah, sure, she went mad based on her experiences, but I thought that maybe she was removing the souls of animals so that Odin couldn't take control of them in the way that he took control of the ravens. They never confirmed that or say it or hinted it. That was my way of justifying the bullshit she put the animals through.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. They pretty much just say, I think they insinuate that she's like feeding on them or feeding off them. Um, and that's partly why Angrboda wanted to stop it.
But you never really
Um,
understand why what's happening is happening. Like,
yeah.
it's just, it's weird.
I mean, the real issue I have with all that was like like the whole section in general in Jotunheim was well, a, the fact that that's really the only time you get to go and explore Jotunheim. Post game, like you can go back to Ratatoskr, you can get the rest of the world tree seeds so that you can travel there, but you can only walk around her camp,
Yeah,
and
and
all
pick a
that's there to
flower.
do is yeah, get the flower and talk to her and see Fenrir again.
And ride
Like
a
that's
yak really slowly.
you can't even do that. Like that you only do that as a trace at the beginning. Like
Yeah, Fenrir's completely blocking the river that Yalo walks through.
there's just
Hmm.
like nothing to do there, and it's kind of disappointing because like you're only there in 2018 at the very end of the game. It's the big climactic finish.
I
um
agree with you that there's nothing to do there, but like the thing that you do there is perfect. Like you pet Fenrir, and
yeah.
and Kratos calls him a good boy, which like reminds me. This is once again endgame content when you're riding around Midgar with the two Svaki and Sveli, or the two
Hmm.
female wolves. Kratos like eventually he calls them good boys, and Freya's like, no, they're girls, and then you get a trophy for like petting them, and like Kratos gets like all like lovable with them. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's just part of like what the game was trying to run home. Like Kratos hugs now, he pets dogs now. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
but I loved it though.
But again, I feel like at the end of the day, Angrboda, very similar to Faye, is another wasted character that really goes nowhere. She's really just there. Like the core purpose of Angrboda being there is to exposit lore info for you, and that's pretty
Yeah.
much it.
Right. And I like to an extent I do agree with what you were saying before, Jason, where maybe this did need to be two games because 2018 was overall pretty honed in on what Norse topics and myths and stuff that it actually focused on. Um, and then this game was like, oh, we have a lot more to cover, and we're doing it all in one game. All right, so a lot of things are mentioned, a lot of things are used for like one and done kind of moments. Angerboda is brought up a couple more times, and like you said, she's a Deus Ex Machina at the end. Um, but like she could have been utilized a lot more, and I also really did not like. The other thing that I didn't like about that section was at the very end where Angerboda goes to give Atreus the marbles containing the giants, and he's like, "No, you you need to hold on to these or
You need the
whatever."
Pokeballs, yeah.
Yeah, you need the Pokeballs. It's like, well, that should I feel like that should have come up in a more important way later, but it never really did.
Yeah.
Any other Jason? Did you have anything you wanted to add about Atreus, or are we good
Um,
to move on from him?
Not really. The Peter Parker quips annoyed me. That's just a. We don't have to delve too into it. I just didn't like a lot of the anachronistic dialogue in this game. It was held to a
Okay.
minimum in the first game, where every once in a while Trace would just go whatever, and it was like this kind of out of place modern speak, but it wasn't too much. In this game, it almost felt like a Marvel level of quips at some points. But
Yeah.
it is what it is. Like they're
Yeah,
trying to
he's
get
kind of a
that
dick,
audience.
right?
Yeah. I mean, his
Um.
overall character arc is fine. Like, he's
Yeah.
basically rebellious. He's an adolescent boy, and then he learns the error of his ways.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about. We got to talk about the elephant in the room, and that's Sindri. Obviously, Brock died. The tier that we thought we knew, the tier that we go and save at the beginning of the game that kind of gets things really moving. It was not really tier, it was Odin in disguise, as Odin likes to do. He likes to disguise himself as people he's not. Also, something I also learned from that the podcast with Eric Williams. I think it was in that podcast. Um, Anytime Tier's subtitled
Yeah, the
in like
accent.
the conversations, the accent isn't there.
Mm.
And then when you find him at the end of the game, the accent is there because
Mm.
that's the real Tier. I found that to be astonishingly interesting. I was
That's really
very
cool.
I was like I did not notice that, and I
I didn't
think
notice that. Yeah.
that's some brilliant foreshadowing in like a really meta way. But anyway, yeah, and we could talk briefly about the pseudo Tier, the Odin Tier. Um, I was very underwhelmed finally meeting Tyr and finding him to be this very scared, anxious, and pretty defeated god of war.
Right.
Um, to the
He got on
point
my
where,
nerves.
well, yeah, he got on my nerves too, but like obviously it was all played up and it wasn't really him. It was just to kind of gain everyone's trust and make
He,
them believe that
he,
he's
he
really this
basically had to be
skittish.
kept alive so that Odin could take his form, I think is the implication.
Yeah, and the fact that you can find him in the post game, the fact that you can save him, and he really is a stark contrast to Odin's version of him. Um, I was actually really disappointed. I feel like we should have had to find him before the end
Hmm.
and have him actually be a part of Ragnarok.
Yes.
Yeah, that
I
would
mean,
have been
he
cool.
in the actual myth, he is there at Ragnarok, and he's the one that fights and defeats Garm, and Garm defeats him at the same
Well,
time.
doesn't he lose his
Obviously,
hand? Or is that
he
earlier?
loses his hand to Fenrir.
Fenrir, that's it,
Um,
yes.
yeah. But obviously, this continuity combining the two of them and Garm slash Fenrir are both on the allies or the protagonist side. Like Tyr wouldn't die fighting Garm because he wouldn't be fighting Garm at all. But like the fact that I really feel like my question throughout through after the big reveal that it wasn't really Tyr was it just had me being like, okay, so where is the real Tyr? Like,
Yeah.
has he really just been dead this whole time? And it's something you could completely miss, not even find if you don't like explore Niflheim at the in after the credits roll. And I don't like that. I feel like Tyr really should have been rescued
He
and
ends up being
part
an
of,
afterthought, yeah.
yeah, like, and they don't even make a big song and dance about it. You just kind of open a cell and it's like, oh, it's
Yeah.
Tyr, and he's like, hey guys, it's me, your good pal Tyr. I've been locked away for so long. I'm gonna go walk around the realms, and then apparently you can go around the world and find him in all the 9 realms, just like there. Which like is cool, but like he should have been part of Ragnarok. He really should have. You really should have had to rescue him as a mandatory thing, and then have him be part of the final fight.
Hard agree. Hard agree.
Yeah, it was both a that was both a satisfying thing, but also a very disappointing thing. It was satisfying in the sense that he's alive and you can actually find him. It was disappointing in that he has no bearing on anything.
Yeah.
Especially given all that build up to it, which I guess you could look at it as like they're pulling the rug out from under you, they're subverting expectations, but the
Yeah.
ultimate payoff to it is unsatisfying because it's just like almost an Easter egg.
Yes. Right. Exactly. Exactly. But that, going back to why Tyr's involved with what we were talking about before anyway, is Odin was disguised as Tyr, stabs Brock, Brock's dead. And Sin, as we were alluding to before, Sindri just unravels. This anxious germaphobe is just very fucking pissed. And he's mad and blames Kratos and Atreus because he didn't want any of this to happen, and um he they invited this person into their home that wasn't real, and he's just finding someone to blame. It's not really their fault. It's no one's fault. No one could have seen that coming. Everyone was fooled.
Yeah. And
But
I
he's
think
just
he
trying to
knows
find
that. He just like he's not ready to
he's
like admit that he understands that, or he's just not, he's seeing black right now,
yeah, he's
because
grieving.
it just happened. Yeah. Like imagine
um
like your best friend dies and then the next day you're like at war.
yeah. um
Which I actually like that it leaves that unresolved. Although that might just be a matter of personal taste.
yeah. uh and we'll see where that goes. Obviously, we you can go to Brock's funeral at the after the after the first sequence of credits. It's actually just a side quest that triggers the main credits. But it's still like an important conclusory moment. um you go to Svartalfheim and go to the funeral thing with what is his name, Durlin, and the bar elf or bar dwarf.
Lunda.
Well, Lunda's
No,
there too.
Lunda is there, but like I know who you're talking about. It's the
Yeah,
guy.
the one that mans the bar. I
Oh
Yeah,
can't remember
yeah,
his
I
name.
forgot his name.
And yeah, Sindri shows up, and Kratos tries to talk to him, and he's just like, no,
yeah.
and
It's
he just
very sudden
disappears.
and matter of fact. Like he just gives
Yeah.
him a look, and then it goes to credits.
Yeah.
Well, he also blinks out, like he does his whole special technique thing where they can
Yeah,
just like blink in and out of places. He just blinks out, and that's it. Um, I do wonder where and how that's going to develop in the future, if it does at all. Who knows? Maybe Sindri just finds a place to hide for the rest of his life, and that's what he does. It's really sad. It's really tragic.
which I like. I like the tragic element of it because it's very well built up over the course of the game. Where it starts out with, I kind of got this secret, and you find out what it is, and it's like it's simultaneously horrifying, but at the same time, really shows the love that Sindri had for his brother, and then the end result of it all, and it just worked. It clicked for me.
And Brock even tells him that he knows and he forgives him, and
Hmm.
it's just it's a difficult moment.
And
It's a
again,
really difficult moment.
because those are the first two characters you really meet. Well, actually, no. I think you meet. Do you meet Sindri after Freya? I know Brock is the first one, but
I don't honestly, I
it
don't
doesn't really
remember.
matter.
It doesn't matter.
They're
Yeah.
basically the two characters you really have the most face time with over the course of the two
Hmm.
games. So it feels like there's a satisfying build up and payoff with them.
Yeah. Um. Ah, shit. There was something else I wanted to bring up. Oh, the last big thing that you kind of do with Brock is getting what I might label as the biggest surprise of the game. On the going to the forge and getting a third weapon.
Right.
Um, which I thought was immensely clever.
The spear,
The
yeah.
the collector's editions came with Draupnir, and Draupnir it's supposed to be an arm ring. um that, yeah, every like eighth night it drips 8 identical rings, and that's why there's so many rings in the basement. It was a gift for the gods, so it was really supposed to be in Odin's possession, and then they kind of allude to the fact that they took it back, but they don't really elaborate on as to how. But it was a really clever it was a really clever way of incorporate. I was wondering like why it was dropped near just like a collector's edition item, because like it's a Norse thing that they could include in the collector's edition. To find out it was actually kind of a big part of the main plot, um I thought that was really really clever and really well executed.
Yeah, it's also
And
just cool
and the
because
spear.
oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, all I was gonna say is it's just that line. You know, the spear is the first weapon I learned to use. Like it kind of
Oh
brings it
yeah,
all home for Kratos, and it makes sense that you would have a Spartan using a spear and shield. Like, and
yeah,
it's extremely fun to use.
yeah. So yeah, Sindri's progression, some of the best parts of this game, and really, really sad and upsetting, and the way it ends off is just it's a lot.
And it's very like again, like while I have criticism, probably more criticisms than praises for the story, that moment between Kratos and Brock after the mermaid forges the sword and clearly doesn't see Brock, which is obviously foreshadowing, like him realizing the truth.
Yeah.
Um, there's that really tender moment between him and Kratos that I think it's one of the best moments in the game. I can't praise its execution enough.
Hmm.
Can we just mention how Freya had more of a reaction to Brock to that death than to Freyr's?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like also let's be honest. Like the escape from Ragnarok, and where Freyr sacrifices himself, like the perspective kind of shifts to Atreus, and he's knocked out unconscious for an undisclosed amount of time. Like maybe she had more of a reaction and grieved during that bit, but we don't see that, so it is kind of off-putting that we don't see her grieve her brother, but yeah, she definitely has a reaction to Brock dying.
yeah, and the way that's framed is weird too because it's almost like it could be interpreted as because Atreus pushes Kratos through the portal and then it just goes to white. So there were
Mm-hmm.
a few minutes where I actually thought that this was like a dream alternate, happy ending.
Oh
But in
god.
reality, Atreus, like that's what I actually thought the first few minutes of that sequence of walking as Atreus and seeing all the characters. I thought this was like, no, it can't end
This
like
is
this.
way
This is
too optimistic.
yes, exactly. I actually thought Atreus in reality died.
Mm. I mean, I really thought they were going to kill Kratos off in this game.
So did I, and I
I'm
think it would have been more satisfying. But
I
that's
don't
me.
know that it would have been. I like I said, I do feel that the conclusion they went with this character, I do genuinely think is the perfect close to his arc. We'll talk more about that during the final question, but like, I I don't I'm pretty satisfied with the ending for as far as Kratos is concerned.
Yeah, me too. I think it would have been too soon, especially based off how they built him up in this game.
Yeah. Um, I feel like we don't have much more to say about Odin. I think he was well executed as a villain.
Yes.
Um, in that he was very deceptive. He was very shifty. He framed himself as an ally, but like he's only there to serve himself. And I know a lot of people were really hyped about him being played by Richard Schiff from West Wing, and I think that Schiff did a great job playing him.
Yeah. Again, the voice acting, the performances, all top notch, and here is probably one of the best ones in the game.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, like his boss battle might have had uninteresting mechanics as we discussed, but as a character and as a portrayal, I specifically like the kind of like mob boss portrayal.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely. He was very charming too.
Right.
Yeah. Also, this is a good transition into the next person. I really like. We talked in the last episode, the God of War 2018 episode. We talked about how this continuity assumes that Frigg and Freya are the same person. Frigg was Odin's wife, and I
It's
really
a pet name.
appreciate.
Yeah.
I appreciate that Odin. It was like kind of a point of annoyance for Freya that
Yeah.
he would refer to her as Frigg.
Although
Hmm.
in the more Germanic, because the Germanic versions of this mythology are somewhat different. So like Frigg is actually the name in the Germanic.
Well,
portrayals. Yeah,
there's some contention.
yeah,
Sometimes they're looked at as two different people.
right.
Sometimes they're looked at as the same
Yeah,
person.
sometimes
This
sometimes she's portrayed as like a goddess of fertility, sometimes a goddess of war, sometimes both. It's
well, at least what I'm basing all my knowledge off of, Freya is a Vanir goddess, whereas Frigg is an Aesir goddess, and
yes.
Freya never marries Odin. Frigg marries Odin. So in order to have that connection between Odin and Freya in this game, and also have Balder be Freya's son, they they combine the two in this continuity, which is sometimes an accepted view of the two characters.
Yeah, it's a
So
problem. It's a
it's
problem you run
kind of works
into
out.
with an oral tradition that, as opposed to like Greek mythology, which is a very you have a few definitive sources and it's a very small geographical
Yeah.
area. Norse mythology covers a very large geographic area, and so there are incongruities, inconsistencies. Yeah,
And was not very well recorded either.
right, exactly.
So, anyway, talk. This is my very sloppy transition into talking about Freya. Um, I opening the game with her attacking Kratos and Atreus was um I mean, it was the most on rails kind of scripted opening you could have had, I guess, but it was still a pretty bombastic way to open the game.
Yeah, I didn't
Um,
expect them to go into that so soon. They went into Freya so soon and Thor like immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people were praising the opening. I kind of thought that the opening was just like it was a whole lot happening very quickly with very little room to breathe, and it also simultaneously felt like the game was taking too long to get started
It's
because we had to do so much. We get attacked by Freya, get back home, and then Atreus is grieving for Fenrir and goes out, so you got to go find him, and then you fight him as a bear, and then you get back to the house and Thor comes a knocking with Odin, and then you fight Thor, and then you get back and Trace is like, okay, we really need to go, Dad, come on, I have to show you the shrine. And then you go to the shrine. It was just like a whole lot of setup that just went on for a really long time until you finally got your first real objective, which is to go to Svartalfheim and look for Tyr.
Yeah, there's definitely a pacing issue with the game that can, in my case, be really exaggerated if you're also doing the side content alongside the main story, where the
Yeah.
game will have chunks where it's moving at breakneck speed and then it just slows to molasses for hours on end before it picks up again and then slows to molasses again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that having such quick pacing in the beginning and then going to Svartalfheim and it being a very puzzly long section, and then even Vanaheim even longer, definitely made the middle, and then Angerboda, forget about it. It made that middle like kind of drag out a lot until you had those like big boss set pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting there was kind of like what happened to the pace in the beginning of the game. It was like all of this in the front, and then it was kind of like dying down in the middle, and then at the end you had a lot more like, the pacing picked up. And I thought the ending of the game was paced very well, but the middle was kind of slow and the beginning was very fast. You're right.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Freya. Did you guys see them actually? I went into this game assuming that she would be like a secondary villain. Never would have seen them reconciling coming, and definitely did not see her being probably the more primary companion character than Atreus was.
So
Yeah.
I knew from the leaks,
Well,
but
yeah,
it's also
but if you hadn't seen the leaks, would you have expected that?
yes, because she's basic. One of my primary problems with Freya's story is that unless you do the side content, which her side quest is more interesting than the main story itself. Her story is basically she's your enemy until she's not, and there's not even a really great transition to it. Like she just
Yeah,
looks away and is like, "I can use you. You're more valuable to me." And yes, there's a little bit of dialogue where she's like, I still haven't decided if I'm going to kill you, but if you die in that sequence, she'll like start mourning you and talking about how Kratos, you can't die. It's a really weird, jarring whiplash
yeah.
Hmm.
where like it's very obvious that she's going to make up with you, but they're trying their best to like drag it out and make it seem like she's not, but she is. Like
Yeah,
as soon as that scene happens, where I think it's right after the Valkyrie boss fight with her, As soon as she like looks away when Atreus is tending to Kratos, it's like, you know, right then.
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of think that there needed to be more of a better catalyst to their reconciliation than just him going to Vanaheim and helping her break the spell.
Right.
Um,
Which you do get in the side quest where you go to the site of their wedding, Odin and Freya, and you have to
yeah,
destroy the wedding gift artifacts, and it ends with her trying to pull her sword that was stabbed into the stone. And there's a very clear parallel there with the Blades of Chaos. And I feel
yeah,
like there's more about her character explored there than at any point in the main story.
yeah. Yeah. Some of the side content definitely would have benefited from being incorporated into the plot over some of the actual plot points. I don't disagree that that side quest was definitely a standout.
I thought
Just
it
like
was
the
really cool. Oh, sorry.
no. I was gonna say just like I felt rescuing Tyr needed to be part of the plot.
Right.
Go ahead, Delilah.
No, I was just gonna say I thought it was really cool that I didn't realize she had like a second sword hilt in the back of her outfit until like that scene where she gets the second sword, and now I want to go back and see if like it was there the whole time. I'm sure it was, but that was really cool detail. A lot
Yeah,
of attention to detail in this game that like I think is worth bringing up.
yeah. The one problem I'll say about her being a companion character was that with they kind of juggle, you know, some parts of the story Freya will be with you, and then some parts of the story Atreus will be with you, and it kind of harms the progression of either character, especially because there's certain things that Atreus has, certain summons, certain abilities, whatever, that you can progress, but like in the end game you'll never see them again. You
Yeah,
don't have him with you, and uh you never get to use some of his stuff again. He's got summons that you'll never get to experience, because he's not with Kratos anymore. So splitting their progression like kind of like that was just I didn't really like that. I think they should have tried to merge them a little better, so progressing one would also progress the other somewhat, and maybe give
yeah.
everything Atreus had also over to Freya so that you'd have it in the end game.
Hmm.
I mean, we'll get into this in the gameplay, but I just feel like generally, if they just got rid of that type of progression system, period, it would have just
Oh,
been a stronger game.
yeah, you and I are we're all I think all three of us are going to be very critical of
Yeah,
that.
in our 2018 discussion, we talked about how we all kind of prefer the original combat, but
Yeah.
my opinion has just soured even more to the point of I just think the original combat is just objectively better for an action game. Granted, there are RPG mechanics here, but do they need to be there?
Well,
We'll get into that,
we'll
but
we'll get
yeah.
into that because I have opinion about I have a lot of opinions about what is and isn't RPG mechanics, or what are and aren't RPG mechanics.
Hmm.
Um, Other characters we haven't talked much about. We didn't really talk about Thrud. Thrud is she's like cool, um, but like I feel like she doesn't matter all that much
She's there
in the
really.
end.
Really there to facilitate Thor's arc to an extent.
And also to be kind of like the other side of a friend to Atreus on the other side of the big
Hmm.
core Norse conflict, which is the Aesir gods versus the giants, whereas Angerboda is another person his age that he befriends, and also happens to be of the opposite sex, so it's kind of like, oh, she could kind of be a love interest to him. Well, so could Thrud, except she's on the other
Yeah,
side of that line, right?
they
She's an
like
Aesir god.
play at potentially a love triangle, but it never really becomes anything. Yeah,
Yeah, because that would just be another thing that this game somehow has to fit in and do
yeah.
something meaningful with
And
that it just
again,
does not have the time to
the key
do.
question: should it have been two games? Yeah,
Yeah. I did like, coupling off of that, I did like Sif eventually, because the kind of the combination of of that family arc with Thor, Sif, and Thrud.
yeah.
Um
I do. I do agree. The only criticism that I'll have of Sif is that her turn against the Aesir. Because if you think about it, before Sif comes out during Ragnarok and says, "No, Loki is right. Odin needs to be put down." The
Yeah.
last time that Loki saw Sif, she was walking up with two Valkyries, like, "Yo, they killed Heimdall. Let's kill this motherfucker." And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
the next time you see Sif, she's all, like, "No, no, we
Well,
need to end this."
to be fair, her realization that Odin was actually terrible was the fact that he was willing to sacrifice
She
those.
always knew that though. Like that's one of the core of
Yeah, well,
Thor's arc.
she didn't like how he treated Thor, and she wanted Thor to stand up to him.
Yeah,
But like I think they all still kind of viewed Odin as their protector. It was kind of it kind of hit different when she realized that he was really willing to sacrifice basically anyone if it meant that he
right.
got to
The
survive.
Midgardians that he was using as a
Yeah.
human
Yeah,
shield. Yeah,
and I think that was I think the real kickoff point.
it's just another point, like with Freya, where it's like she was your enemy until she wasn't,
Yeah, no, I agree.
and it just
Um,
has to do with the pacing and the speed at which all these events are happening at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
mhm. But I just really enjoyed the family drama and the progression of that
That bar
storyline.
fight was so
Oh
fun.
yeah,
Oh
no,
yeah,
yeah.
that was a lot of fun.
Everything to do with Thor. It's funny. It's like it's kind of like how Katase talked about Sephiroth in the original Final Fantasy VII. How they thought of
Uh-huh.
it like Jaws. Like the less you saw of him, the more. But it's kind of the same with Thor, where like you don't see too much of him over the course of the game, but when you do,
Yeah,
it's impactful.
Yeah.
yeah.
And the story there is really good. And like I said, it's basically in many ways parallel to the story of Reinhardt's character in Opie in Sons of Anarchy, which don't need to delve too deeply into, but it's a good family drama where like a guy with a troubled past is trying to make amends and he's struggling with it and he
Hmm.
fails, but he ultimately makes the right decision.
Yeah.
Um, the only other character that I would want to like, I feel like we could talk about Mimir, but Mimir doesn't have like a ton of development in this game. You find out more about his past when
In
he
the side
served
quests,
Odin
yeah,
in
in
the
the
side
side quest,
quests.
and all of Mimir's side quests are basically parallels to things going on with the main characters in the main story.
Yeah.
Um,
I will say that the first of all, Heimdall, total asshole,
Yeah.
perfectly
I
executed
love it. Yeah,
character, super well done, super well executed. And I really, it was really interesting when you fight him as Atreus and you cannot lay a single hit on him
Mm-hmm.
to the point where he's the catalyst to going and getting a new weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I that boss fight ruled, and the end of it all when he is so unwilling to just accept that he lost and kind of goads Kratos into killing him, and Mimir falling on the ground and seeing him actually commit the act, because Mimir never really sees most of this stuff. He's always on
Yeah.
Kratos'
hmm
ass just watching behind. Like he actually sees this and he's like, brother, and like
Yeah, that was a
it was.
yeah.
really impactful scene.
Although
The only criticism I have on that scene, and it's not even a criticism, it's just I guess a preference thing. I wish they had gone further and just had him beat his head to a pulp, like he does
like
Hercules and
Zeus,
no Hercules and well yeah Zeus too, but
yeah.
like if you're gonna have a moment where Kratos breaks and like revert to those old ways, just go all the way with it.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of a problem I have with like one of the I guess one of the themes of this game. I guess you could look at it as like control or however you want to put it, which is kind of a theme in the first or not the first game, 2018 as well, where Kratos is just trying to control his rage and not revert back to his old ways. Like rehashing that theme here and like making it out as if it's a big deal that Kratos murdered someone who he heard was prophesized to potentially kill his son, and like make it seem like he did something wrong. I'm just like, how? The guy was a threat.
Yeah,
Like he was just doing what he really it's not like he it was out of spite. It's not like the original trilogy where he was just killing them to take revenge.
and
He
he does show
viewed him
mercy
as
to him at first, like he
yeah,
Yeah.
switched to it. Yeah,
which is why I was like rehashing that old plot point and trying to make a big deal about it just didn't sit well with me. Didn't sit right with me. It kind of just didn't make any sense. Um, so that's kind of the last point I want to make on Heimdall and I guess one of the themes of this game.
I guess they're just trying to show that like it can come back if given the right circumstances, like that rage
Yeah.
could surface again. And he's really like trying hard not to. He even says it like every path I walk leads to vengeance, which for me sounds like foreshadowing for future shit, but it was just relevant to that moment.
Yeah, I think it was just relevant to that moment personally. Um, any other character or story stuff that we need to talk about before we move on to some other things?
I don't think
No, I
so.
mean,
I
you
mean,
have Radagasker listed here, but I mean, he's a squirrel.
Yeah,
He's
Ratatasker,
he's a
like
squirrel. He talks. He's there.
he was a delightful character. I really liked that they I feel like they picked the perfect voice actor for him. They got I don't know his actual name. I only know him by his YouTube name, which is ProZD. He does like funny little YouTube skits that are usually like anywhere between like 10 and 15 to like a minute long, 10 to 15 seconds to like a minute long. He's really funny, and I think he did great as all the different personalities of Ratatasker.
yeah.
Um, a character meant for comic relief, but also just like really well done.
Right. I
So I just
particularly
wanted to,
like the dialogue. If you keep hitting the chimes over and over again,
yeah,
and you just increasingly piss him off. That was a
yeah,
nice
like
detail.
the bitter squirrel. If you don't walk away right away after you're done talking, the bitter squirrel is just like, what? You don't know how to end a conversation? You just walk away. Just walk away.
Yeah,
Like it
but
was really,
if you keep hitting the chime, he's just like, "Oh, I see. You're trying to get me riled up. Well, it will not work." And then eventually he just breaks and like starts
yeah, yeah,
yelling at you, "Stop the damn chimes!" Yeah,
yeah. I mean, there's like a couple things like that with that character. It's really well done. Prosy did a great job as Ratatosker.
again, the voice
Overall,
act.
I like.
Yeah, again, the voice acting, the facial anime, even for like a squirrel, like it's all
Yeah.
so high quality, well done. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. We've already kind of talked about the themes that I feel this game had. I don't know that we need to drill down more into that stuff.
and
I
the game will hit you over the head with it way more than it needs to. How many
yeah,
times did they say be better?
like we're not even that. Just like the amount of, like I said, take a shot every time you hear the word trust, and you'll be trashed before you know it.
And,
It's way too heavy handed.
and yeah, and this is a side note about some of the dialogue, and going back to what I was saying earlier about there being so many writers, and seemingly some of the writers seem disconnected from other ones. Like there's a scene where Kratos sits down and he's like, they basically explicitly state their character arcs. Like Kratos sits down and says, "I have been too controlling, and I haven't changed. I'm sorry, Atreus." And then Atreus awkwardly says, "No, father, I'm sorry too. I was being rebellious and reckless. We need to be better." And it's like if I was an editor of those writers, I'd be like, take 90% of this shit off. Just have Kratos say, "I'm sorry." Atreus says he's sorry. Be better. Like the audience
I
knows the character's arcs. You don't have to state it explicitly.
honestly, and in those parts, like the thing that really worked best for me, and like honestly, I feel like they didn't even need to explicitly say a lot of stuff. The times where Kratos and Atreus hugged were the only
Hmm.
times in the entire game that I really teared up.
And it goes back to the
Yeah.
visual storytelling with almost no dialogue that happened in the first game.
Yeah.
It was the moments like that, and moments like
Like yeah, like I know exactly what you're talking about. Like the part where like Atreus kills the
the
deer
deer
and
and the hand,
Kratos, yeah, he goes to put his hand on the
which
shoulder and doesn't.
which was taken from Pandora in God of War 3. That happened in God of War 3.
Um. Anyway, any the only times I teared up in this game were anytime they hugged, especially after, oh man, especially after they reunited.
Yeah, that was
Um.
like really intense.
Yeah. Like what was that right before right before going to Helheim?
Hmm.
Um. Like Kratos, and the line too that Kratos said to him was like, "What do I call you, Atreus or Loki?" And he just
Yeah.
hugs him, and I was like, "Oh fuck,
Yeah,
here we go."
that's a great
That
scene.
I messaged you too, saying like something just happened that
Yeah.
actually got me emotional. That was the moment that
Hmm.
I was
Yeah,
referring
And,
to.
that
and,
was really
and I
emotional.
knew what you were talking about. And there are individual great scenes like that that in a vacuum work fantastically. Like during Ragnarok when he says to Atreus, "Open your heart to it."
Yeah,
Basically, great scenes like that are just bogged down in a lot of really messy, stuff that we've been talking about for almost 2 hours
yeah,
now, or over 2 hours
yeah,
now.
yeah. Over two
Or
hours.
or
Go ahead.
even when Atreus comes to the tent right before the battle and like sleeps with him, and
Yeah, he said
that
he
was really
he
nice.
was really excited about having his own tent, and then a few minutes later, he pops into Kratos' tent. And's like, "Can I sleep here tonight?"
Yeah.
That was sweet as hell.
Yeah, a lot of good
Um,
moments like that. I obviously cried at that like wolf moment in the beginning with Fenrir because like
yeah,
it's how like that's how that shit plays out. Like it starts with them not eating, and so
yeah,
like I got that, and then the Brock moment. Like I think I cried like 4 times in this game, and it was basically hugs or death.
yeah. Oh, we didn't even bring up with Atreus part of his gameplay, being able to turn into animals. Um, how did you guys feel about those sections? And really, I guess the big reveal of that was fighting the bear that turns out to be Atreus.
Bjorn.
I honestly didn't really expect that.
No,
Um, I would like for the bear to have been him. I was like, oh, cool. They're actually going to play into this. That's great. The fact that he can shapeshift. That's good.
yeah,
Good.
that was really cool. But then at the end of the game where you have that like Guardians of the Galaxy moment where
Yeah.
like
Against the wasn't that against
the
the
two
two
Valkyries,
Valkyries?
yeah.
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 That was
And they end with that pose that looks like
Right.
it's like
that's
a
what she's
victory
talking
scene from
about.
yeah, it's like a victory scene from Super Smash Brothers. Like
I feel like that's like the screen where like the Persona 5 like results screen of after the battle is gonna pop up, like experience points, money.
Yeah.
yes, exactly.
That
You're
was
almost expecting Kratos to point out like Ace Attorney, like
yeah, that was something. I
That whole section was really cool, period.
if that wasn't such a massive spoiler for like a late game moment, I would almost say let's make that the thumbnail for this episode, but
right.
Yeah.
no, we can't do that.
Yeah, no.
um all right, let's move on to some other stuff. The Nine Realms, we didn't get to visit all nine. We got to visit six in 2018. Was I think that they balanced out the fact that the realms that we didn't get to visit in the 2018 game, namely Svartalfheim,
Vanaheim.
Vanaheim, and Asgard, at least the first two were definitely they definitely tried to make up for that fact by making those two the beefiest areas of the game.
Hmm.
Asgard obviously was a little harder to they couldn't really make that explorable because that needed to service a lot more
Story
um
elements, yeah.
yeah, core plot moments. But how did you guys feel about the Nine Realms? Did you have any favorites? um any place that you didn't like going to?
The only realm that I really enjoyed was Midgard, and that's because it was like exploring the Lake of the Nine, except in like ice, you know?
You're just happy you got to hang out with some puppies.
And I hung out with some puppies, of course. And then also, was it, uh, oh my God, Alfheim, where you release the jellyfish?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like seeing that like just the jellyfish constantly in the sky was a really cool thing, like way to explore it. That was also the easiest realm to kind of clean up,
Yeah.
whereas Vanaheim was my least favorite because it was so
See,
windy.
I loved Vanaheim, but there was entirely too much stuff there.
It depends how you approach it. So I started to dread Vanaheim because I made sure to do everything before I continue with the main story.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
feel like that contributes to it. I feel like the pacing, a lot of it can be attributed to, do you just continue with the story or do you stop and make sure you're doing everything?
So I
And I was stopping.
actually
Yeah.
didn't do any side stuff except for what was right in my face. So I didn't explore Vanaheim. I actually stopped myself from going when you go to the crater and you follow like the boar there. I was like, oh no, this I can tell this is opening up a lot. And even still, if you just do it all post game, there's still certain things that you need to do in Vanaheim specifically for you to complete it. You have to do it in a specific order, but the game doesn't tell you to do it in that order. So you wind
Hmm.
up exploring and finding things, and then you wind up not being able to do everything until you do something else, and that was very annoying.
Yeah. I it kind of goes against my general opinion about how open video games can be, but like I did enjoy Vanaheim just because this I felt like the majority of the stuff that we were doing in Vanaheim was the most meaningful stuff. It was some of the best side content in the game, but there was entirely too much of it.
Yeah,
and Alfheim was the first instance of you go out to that first big open area, which is all just side content, and that was the first point that I realized, oh god, this game is gonna
Yeah, because that's
take
just
me a
half of
long
the area.
time.
Yeah, you can't go
Yeah.
in until later to fully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So okay,
Yeah.
I
What was
just
your
can't.
favorite realm?
Probably Vanaheim. I really did
Interesting.
like Vanaheim. My least favorite was probably Muspelheim because I don't like how they did the trials this time
Ugh.
around. Um, they
So
were,
stupid.
yeah, like you have to do the initial challenges or whatever, and then the final challenges are just from doing these. There's these in the three initial arenas. You do one, and then you do a second one, and you unlock a new final challenge, and then you have to do them all in different order. So you wind up doing every single one of those challenges, I think, at least 3 times.
Yeah, and that's if you know what you're doing. Because I didn't
No,
know.
I think it's even more than that. Sorry.
It's six. Well, okay, so you do them in it. So there's three challenges within each door. There's three doors, and within each door, there's three challenges. So you have to do that to unlock the last six. And to do
Yeah.
the last six, you have to do like door one, door two, then door two, door one
Yeah,
in
I'm just
six
I'm just
times.
I saw that. I
yeah.
saw all this
Yeah.
on YouTube, like how you had to remember which platform it was, and beat all the time waves of enemies. And I was just like, fuck. It was the same reaction I had to Muspelheim in the original game. Like,
Yeah, but it wasn't nearly as convoluted or frustrating in the original from what I
Or
remember. I don't
confusing,
even
yeah.
yeah, or
the
confusing.
the thing about like the first Muspelheim is you're literally climbing a mountain, and as you climb the mountain, it gives you the challenges, and then
Yeah,
you get up to the final challenge, which is the Valkyrie, one of the Valkyries.
right.
And in this one, it's like you're in this one arena, which I'm fine with, but then just give me the last six challenges instead of making me do some weird order bullshit
Just
to
wasting
unlock
my
them.
time
Yeah.
doing things that I've already done to unlock new things that I haven't done yet. Just
right.
Yeah.
give me the
Waste of
things that I
time.
haven't done yet. And like it sucked because I as far as I could tell, there was no way for me to determine which order of things I had already done. So I like desperately wanted to take a break, and I was like, no, if I take a break, I might come back to this tomorrow and not remember which
Th-
order of things
yeah.
I haven't done yet. So I'm
Yeah.
just gonna bang them all out right then and there. And it was just exhausting and frustrating, and I hated it.
Yeah. And that was just one section of Muspelheim. Like you do have the normal like volcanic section, which was totally fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a really bad. Muspelheim in the first game wasn't great, and neither was Niflheim. I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Niflheim, but at least Niflheim this time around
this
was just
time,
like
I wish they would have done the same with Muspelheim. Like, cut
yeah.
it out.
Yeah.
Or at least just
Okay.
make it a small explorable area. You don't have to do this whole big thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like get rid of the challenges. Who cares about that? Throw the Valkyrie in there and then keep it moving.
Yeah. As far as like other side content, the only other thing that besides like the two end game bosses, the only bit of side content that I really want to bring up and talk about that we haven't already discussed, like both sides of the side quests that we brought up that were worth talking about. Um, I was geeking out about Kvasir's poems, guys. I got 3 of them before I realized what they were,
Yeah.
and I every time I got a new one, I was like, "Oh, let me interpret which game is this referring to?" They're all PlayStation game references.
It's a
Yeah,
nice little Easter egg. Yeah.
Yeah, I really really loved that.
it was
Um,
fun, but what made it cooler is that Mimir kept trying to ask Kratos, like, which was his favorite poem, and he was like, I don't have a favorite.
yeah, and like asking like if they had poetry from his land, he's like, "Of course, we were Greek. The Greeks are known for their poetry."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
The only the only bit about that Kratos' like side dialogue that and this is mainly just because history geek thing. He says he was at the Battle of Thermopylae, the Battle of the 300, and
mhm,
simultaneously talks about being at the Trojan Wars, which are like thousands of
mhm.
years apart. This is all presumably before he becomes a god. So
Hmm.
I mean, you gotta take some of this stuff
I
with
know, I know.
with
It's just a minor thing that I was like, but that's just
yeah.
me being a history geek. Like,
I mean,
Yeah.
I say you got to take some of this with a grain of salt. Meanwhile, I'm like, that's not how Odin lost his eye. God damn it!
Hmm,
Like, what are
hmm.
you talking about, game? Okay, is there any other side content you guys wanted to bring up
No, I mean,
besides the end game bosses? We'll talk about them a little bit.
I just thought that the stuff adding to the characters was cool, but also annoying that like people are gonna miss out on that. That's it. There's a
Yeah.
lot there.
Oh, a bit of dialogue that I just remembered that I really loved was them talking about Kratos and Mimir talking about like the foods that they missed, and Kratos said that he really missed
Olive
olives,
oil, yeah,
and
olives, yeah,
Mimir was like, "What the hell is an
an olive,
olive?"
yeah. Yeah, see some of that, and that goes back to the dialogue. Some of that stuff lands, and this is
Yeah.
how like there are different writers, and then some of it is like you're not lucky, you're low key, and I just want to bash my head against the wall.
Oh yeah, I hated that. That was a terrible line. What was the one with Brock? It was like the juicy,
I
the
know what you're
juicy
talking about.
knocking.
Yes,
Yeah, so where Sindri was telling them why Brock was banned from Alfheim. I think it was Alfheim, and it's because he talked about a juicy knockin or nokin. And Atreus was about to ask, "What is a juicy nokin?" And Kratos interjects and is just like, "No."
yes, yeah,
That was hilarious. Okay, let's talk. We got to keep moving here. So let's talk about the combat and the progression system and why we wish it was not an RPG or not an action game trying to be an RPG.
I'm just like sick and tired of action adventure games feeling like they need to implement RPG mechanics. I remember when it first started happening, I thought it was cool, but now that every game's doing it, I hate it. And I just feel like I'm spending more time in menus, like trying to figure out what's worth leveling up and what's not. And we had to upgrade every single armor piece. And I'm like, why couldn't it just be at least a set if we're going to come to some sort of balance? But no, you had to worry about armor sets, relics, runes, amulets, like all this bullshit that I'm like, yo, this is Kratos. Like he doesn't even one need armor. Like he could freaking bash through things like without armor. He literally was shirtless for the first 3 games. And then now you're adding like all these different types of armor, and I feel like most of the time when I lose in a battle, it's not because I'm bad, it's because I don't have the right level, and that annoys me. I feel like if I'm like going to a place and fighting something and it's not an RPG, I should be able to take it out, not have to like come back to this place with like better armor and a higher level in order to like fight the enemy effectively.
This is an action game that's not really focused on whether or not its combat is up to snuff with the encounters that you're actually facing. It's more concerned with making sure your stats are up to snuff
yeah,
with what you're facing.
and the inherent problem for me with adding these RPG elements is that it becomes less about a traditional hack and slash games like the original trilogy was, which was inspired by Devil May Cry. Um, it becomes less about comboing and getting in these fantastic combat situations, and it becomes more about if it like my RPG brain clicks in, and I'm worried about efficiency. And you really come to the conclusion that the most efficient thing you can do, use 2 runic attacks, do a couple of hits to get burn or frost or whatever to enhance your next weapon, switch to the next weapon, do the runic attacks, and you're triggering cooldowns. You're basically trying to use your cooldowns as efficiently as possible. So it becomes less about the combos and more about just, all right, window to attack. Now I defend parry. Keep going back to that. Use your runic attacks, do a few hits, switch weapons, runic attacks,
And
and that becomes the most efficient way just because of the design of the combat, and it becomes boring. At first it's fun, but it just loses its luster over the course of the game.
Yeah.
each weapon has its own upgrade path that gets you new moves, and it's really disappointing when when you're in like a boss fight, especially with a lot of the end game optional bosses and
And you
stuff.
can't actually do the full combo.
You can't do most of those moves are they're so circumstantial and they
Right.
just don't apply to those bosses. You wind up doing exactly what you just said, which is what I did with every berserker boss fight. Basically, you pop all your cooldowns, and you get in some attacks when you can until those cooldowns come back, and then you just rinse and repeat. And
Yeah.
that's how you beat all those bosses. That doesn't make for very good combat. I'm sorry, it
And it's
really doesn't.
and the other side of it is this camera. the over-the-shoulder camera, which I felt worked well, especially with the one-on-one bosses um, in the original game, and I was able to tolerate it. But here, with the encounter design being so mob heavy
Yeah,
and the on-screen indicators can get
it's
confusing.
basically useless.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it gets to a point where they have to turn down the music in big key moment battles. So I didn't a lot of the new soundtrack I've only heard because I listened to it on Spotify. I didn't hear it in the game because the music volume is turned down so you can hear Freya going, "It's still there. Aim for the weak spot. What are you doing, Kratos? It's still there. Aim for the weak spot." Like
Yeah.
that's the reason I didn't enjoy the Nidhogg fight is because Freya kept fucking yelling the same three lines over and over again.
Yeah,
Because
I
and the developers know it's because of the camera and how restrictive it is. You can't even turn to track some of your targets because they're moving so fast.
Yeah.
yeah,
Eh,
like I said. Oh, go
yeah.
ahead, Delilah.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
No, 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 no. Please, please, please.
No, I was just gonna say I like the combat in this game a lot, a lot, a lot. But when you get to the end game bosses and those like things that aren't a spectacle like the main bosses in the main game, it's just it's just stupid. Like I way more enjoyed the Valkyries because it felt like a one-on-one thing. I didn't feel like I was getting like hit from behind out of nowhere where I had to like dodge hit like you guys were describing. Yeah, like spamming the runic attacks and amplifying my cooldown. Um, in this one, that's all there was, and it just got really disappointing to the point where like I'm like, do I like some of the enemies? I'm like, I'm just gonna drop this down to easy just to get through this like sequence
Yeah,
Right.
and like because it's not fun and it's not challenging me, it's just stupid.
it's just pissing me off.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jason, I really liked your idea of at the end the it going back to like the old combat
Yeah, that's my
style.
hot take. Is that the final battle of Ragnarok? They should have done a complete 180. It's like you are playing old school fixed camera God of War,
See,
and you see
that's
everything going on in the background while you're just mowing through a horde. That would have
that's like
been
something. See,
such a
that's like
baller move.
something but that's like something that only like a game with like the confidence of like something like Nier would have, you
Right.
know, where it would pull a move like that where it totally changes things up on the fly, but still it's still balanced well enough that you can do it just fine. But this combat just doesn't work like that,
Yeah.
and it you know it's I liked this combat overall too when it worked, but it's like Final Fantasy 15's combat. It's really fun until something comes along that just completely fundamentally breaks it.
Like
And Final
something
Fantasy,
with a massively inflated health pool and three attacks that you basically are just watching it complete the attacks. You do your runic attacks and then you wait through the three
yeah,
windows, and you're basically just doing that over and over again for 3 minutes straight. There's no change
yeah,
up. Yeah.
that was like
Yeah.
all the berserkers in this game, every single one, and like some of them, the berserkers were basically the same thing as the Valkyries in 2018, except there were more of them,
Mhm.
and they realistically had the same attacks. They just used different elements.
And some of them were artificially difficult because they use mobs at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one that had two additional things fighting with it that were not easy.
No.
And I got like some of these fights I felt like I got by not because I overpowered them, but because I got lucky.
Hmm.
And like you don't want
Yeah.
that in a combat system. You don't want to win because you got lucky.
I felt like I could only get through those mob berserker gravestones when I unlock the runes from getting the rodents, the ravens, Odin's
Mhm.
ravens, where it has like a massive AoE attack, like
Yeah.
either burn or freeze or wind. And that's how I was able to take care of those berserkers. But like, why do I have to wait until I unlock something to get through it? That this is my problem. Like I should be able to do it based on my arsenal that I already have. I shouldn't have to get this. I should be able to use the runic attack that I want, not the one that's most effective.
I mean, we've talked about this before, listeners, and you've definitely heard me mention this on episodes past, particularly the Horizon ones. This game would be far better if it just dropped all the RPG mechanics. Just
Yeah.
focused on combat, focus on like core character progression, like the original games did. You unlock tools as you go, and you progress them through a very very simple experience point system. That's all you need. Like
Hmm.
Yeah.
that's hardly even an RPG mechanic.
This game would be so much stronger if it was for that. Like
If
it
you
would
didn't,
honestly like be my game of the year if it was streamlined in that
yeah,
way.
if you didn't need to find a new thing to cover Kratos' nipples with,
I
it
was
would
trying to
be
keep them exposed the whole time, man. Let me tell you. I was
you
like,
gotta
Kratos does not wear armor, okay? He does.
you gotta level the gear up all the way to level 9 if you want to transmog it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh but yeah, this is I think this is something that we kind of said in the 2018 episode, so I'm not sure that we need to go into it
Yeah.
too much further with
No.
this. I will say that it was definitely better in this game than it was in 2018, because at least your armor didn't have like enhancement slots and you had like all these different enhancements to put into each piece of gear you had. Instead, they just give you one amulet with 9 slots, and it's like, okay, all of them will just go into this one thing. You're still going
Yeah.
to get a fuck ton, but at least they all only go into this one thing. And I'll tell
Right.
you what, I got 3 different sets of 3 and I put them on there, and then I never changed them again for the rest of the game.
Well, and then you have to like unlock perks. And I don't even know what the perks are to like actually use them to their full effect. So it just, I don't know, it was too much.
There's a
Like
lot of
even though
useless
like
builds. There's a lot of
yeah,
like even the Berserker armor, which gives you this special runic attack that does a shit ton of DPS. The trade-off is that you're extremely vulnerable. So I
Yeah.
ended up just running with the Dwarven armor that focuses on making you a tank, giving you high defense, extra healing abilities, keep the stun, the most basic bitch thing throughout the entire game. I never
A lot of
changed.
people, I know a lot of people really like Lunda's armor because it like applied poison and did more damage to poison enemies.
But again,
That
yeah.
was a
then you're
pretty
sacrificing vitality so that
well. I'm
one
just like,
mistake becomes more costly.
it's just like, well, I don't want to have to worry about any of this fucking garbage. Like, why can't I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
play a God of War game? You know?
Yeah.
Uh,
Like it doesn't need to be like the Mega Man style that we had back then, but like just let me upgrade just the core weapons and not every single armor piece. Not even armor set. I don't want it.
just
But if
have progression focused on like new combos, new and interesting combos. You know?
Hmm.
yeah.
Maybe have like different combos where like you do 3 hits with the axe and then switch to the blades and do a combo finisher with those. You know, lean more into the fact that the origin of your series was basically creating a Devil May Cry clone,
Yeah.
where you can do stuff like that. It's just a lot, and it's really frustrating.
How
Yeah.
did you guys feel about the puzzles in this game?
Okay. Do we want to talk about how you barely get to solve the puzzle before your companion gives it the fuck away for you?
Yeah. Lots of
I
backseating from the
found
NPCs.
most of the mechanics were similar to the first game, so they were most of them were easy to figure out. And then the new stuff they added with the runic arrows was more annoying than anything else to me, at least.
I feel like it was just like for me, if all a puzzle consists of is doing one very basic thing to get rid of an obstacle,
Then
just
why
to move
have
forward.
it?
Like say there's a barrel in front of you and you just need to use a soundstone arrow on it and then you can move forward. Yeah, why have it?
Mm.
If it doesn't take more than one step, why is it a puzzle that you felt needed to be included?
I felt like they needed to strip that down like 70%. There was way too much of that, like, "Oh, there's this thing, okay, I gotta pull out this and, like, angle this," and it just, like, once again, took away from the pacing of the game, especially when you're in Svartalfheim and, actually Alfheim as well, and then,
Yeah, the
yeah,
reflections. Oh
Vanaheim.
my god, the
Oh,
reflections were
those
so.
reflectors.
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
probably the only puzzle thing that I genuinely had an issue with. Like overall I'm okay with having puzzles in your game if they're interesting puzzles, but this game had a lot of puzzles that weren't interesting, and then it also had a lot of puzzles where I felt like I didn't get to figure it out myself. I would be
Yeah.
looking at the thing that I had to do, and then Atreus or Freya or whoever the hell was like, "Hey, why don't you look at that thing over there?" It's like, what the fuck? What do you think I'm doing? Like,
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah,
And
that should have been, like, an accessibility toggle or something.
well, a lot of people thought it was, but turns out like the puzzle timing thing and the accessibility menu was really just for like I guess like the Nornir chests, the timing of like when you ring a bell and then they only a rang for like a certain amount of time,
Yeah.
you have more time to go get the
That's
other.
that
Ah,
stuff
I
can
should have put that on.
yeah, that stuff can just get frustrating for me at least because I know the solution. It's just figuring out the exact positioning of the character to make it in sequence,
Yeah,
and it can just
yeah,
get real annoying real fast.
yeah,
I just felt like there was just too much of it. There were too many like barriers to getting to the next thing, and like every time I solved it, then I hit something else, especially in the like beginning of the game.
hmm
I think towards the end of the game, after I guess after you meet Angerboda, that's when it started to get a little better. But before, I mean, I get it. It's like dwarves like do this, you know. So of course, if you're in Svartalfheim, you'll have to solve some sophisticated level of puzzle in the tunnels. But I don't know. I felt like I was just constantly hitting too many barriers, and I don't mind puzzles. There's just too much of it. And in a God of War game, I just don't think it's necessary. I feel like these Sony games are starting to like meld into like this
Oh,
really formulaic thing,
yeah.
and the
I heard.
puzzle solving is part of that.
I've kind of
Hmm.
been saying this since God. I almost want to say Ghost of Tsushima. Um,
Yeah.
all of Sony's first party games are starting to feel way too similar.
Hmm.
And like I loved Ghost of Tsushima, but that was mostly because of the setting and the
The
combat.
aesthetic, yeah, and this kind, yeah,
Yeah, like presentation wise, that game was fantastic, but it was starting to feel way too similar to all other Sony first party games, and that's only gotten worse with Horizon, and now this, even Ratchet and Clank to an extent,
Yeah.
which me getting into Ratchet and Clank is like we could rant about that. I could rant about that on a whole other podcast for the same time that it took us to talk about all this because that's a progression that's just wild to me. But yeah, this game, you can tell it's a Sony first party game, and that's because they're all starting to feel way too similar to one another.
Yeah.
Um, but the last thing I want to talk about before the final question, did either of you get to do either of the end game bosses
I've
yet?
watched them. I didn't do it. No,
Okay.
I'll be
Us.
honest with you guys. Once if I hit the credits, I like instantly lost any interest in continuing playing the game, which
Yeah.
I think says a lot about the gameplay and exploration. I mean, granted,
Yeah.
I did a shit ton during my playthrough,
Yeah.
so I ended
Yeah.
up having like 30 odd hours into it because I did all the side content as I was going that you could do. But once
Yeah.
the main story, the thrust of it was done, I was drained of any motivation to keep going.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
because I hadn't gone off the beaten path, I was motivated, but that motivation like quickly dwindled as I went and realized just how repetitive it was, and like there was rewards for doing it for sure. Like we mentioned, there's some really core character information that you find, but that was just passing by. It wasn't like, oh, I had to complete this quest or this side quest for that to happen. I just had to like kind of go in this area. So I wouldn't. I feel like they could have had those moments without all this extra bloat.
Yeah.
But I didn't. So I basically still have to fight the Valkyrie in Muspelheim, and I have to
Okay.
fight the final Berserker.
Okay. Good luck
I
with both of them. King Rolf wasn't actually like too bad. Again, the Berserkers are the exact same thing as the Valkyries from 2018. Um, Rolf is going to have the same basic move set, but he switches elements, all the different elements that all the other Berserkers used. Um, but he was still tough and had a large health pool, so it's the same basic shit. Gna fucking sucked.
Mm,
She was not fun to fight against. She had attacks once you get to like her last half of health. She had attacks that basically give you no warning that they're coming, and she does a shit ton of damage with them. And it just felt unfair and unfun. And I, once again, it was a fight that I got really lucky. She kept getting stun locked by I don't even know what was stun locking her, and I was able to get her health all the way down with that with her getting stun locked and finished her. And that was on like I don't even know how many tries, my 10th maybe more.
yeah.
It just wasn't fun. I remember the Valkyries being so much fun, and beating
they
them
were,
and
yeah.
beating Sigrun at the end was like very rewarding, and this
Mm,
none of this stuff was. It just
yeah.
felt so imbalanced and broken. I played on give me balance difficulty the whole time. I didn't I didn't I don't like to lower the difficulty even if it means that I would just move me along. I don't like to do that. It's a personal thing. I don't fault anyone that does do that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I for the whole game I played on balance as well, and then
Yeah,
when I was fighting like main bosses like the dragons and the like berserkers and stuff, I would put it back to normal cuz I
yeah,
felt like there were fights, but then I started to realize that like it didn't really make a difference. Like
yeah.
what made the difference was my gear, and that's what bothered me. So I was
Hmm.
like, okay, so let me just like when I'm fighting like just mobs, put it on easy so I can get through to the boss and then put it on normal and make sure I have the correct gear.
Yeah,
And the same thing with these final fights. I'm like, I have to get my gear to level 9 because I beat the game at level 4. And so I had
yeah,
to like because I didn't do any side stuff, and I have to get my gear. I had to like grind to get my gear all the way to. I'm still at 8, so like I feel like I'm doing all these things really under leveled, where it feels like it's hard, even though I like have it on normal mode.
yeah, yeah. A lot of it just wasn't
Yeah, there
fun.
really isn't the opportunity for level 1 retching with a club, if you know what I mean.
um, anything else we want to bring up? We gotta wrap this show up.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to bring up before the final question?
No, I think we touched on everything. It's just this game gave me an appreciation of the 2018's focus, and they really seem to have an image, and they refrain from doing a lot of the extravagant stuff they could have. And in this game, it's I feel the complete opposite. It's weighed down by how bloated a lot of it feels. So a
Yeah,
lot of the issues that may have existed in that one game feel much more um, imminent here, just because of how many other problems are going on.
yeah,
Yeah, I overall like do like how focused 2018 was in terms of like cleaning up, and I do feel the character and the emotional moments in this in Ragnarok are a lot stronger, and I do think overall Ragnarok is like a better game. Like it's definitely more polished, um, but I still feel like it's just falling into this formula that's just not vibing with me anymore.
yeah,
It lost the new factor that I think also 2018 had. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I was much stronger on that game the first time I played it. When I replayed it for our episode on it two
I could
years
not.
ago,
I had to stop a few hours in. I couldn't do it anymore. Yeah,
that was yeah, that was when I realized like, man, I'm really seeing the cracks this time. And I think that 2 year progression, I had really changed. I'd gotten fatigued on that, on the RPGification of games, as I like to call
same.
it. I'm
Yeah,
really, it's something that really annoys me now.
unless
It
it's actually an
bothers.
RPG, which is what I said in
Well, yeah, like
the
if you're an
seven remake.
actual
I said that in the
right,
seven remake review. You pick one. That's my preference.
it, okay. Well, you and I have differing opinions on that game's combat and progression, but like, this is not an RPG. This game is an action adventure game trying to be an RPG, just like Horizon, and I
yeah.
don't like that. I really don't like that. It's unnecessary. Okay, final question. We got to speed through this. Basically, just where do you guys think it goes next? Do we continue anything with Kratos now being like kind of the head of the Norse lands, or do you think the next game stars Atreus on his travels?
I think they might do a like not a mainline God of War game because you can't call it God of War if you're playing as Atreus.
Yeah.
um, they might do some kind of spin-off with Atreus and like start a different series with him, or just a standalone game. Who knows? But I don't see them continuing with Atreus in a God of War game.
Jason, what do you think?
I think that Sony Santa Monica would like what they want to do. I think is do something new to pull a
Oh yeah, I
Guerrilla
hope
Well,
Games
so.
I mean, yeah.
or a Sucker Punch. What will happen is I think they'll be forced to compromise and do something along the lines of what Delilah said, or maybe go to Egypt with Kratos. Who knows?
I mean, I kind of wonder if they don't call the next one God of War, but have a title that kind of ties in with Atreus's relationship to Kratos to still like make it obvious that it's part of that franchise, but obviously they can't. That he's not Atreus isn't a or the God of War in any respect. He's the son of the God of War. So like,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Could they call him like God? Could they call the next one God of Mischief?
Right.
because he's Loki. Like, I don't know, but I do think if
I might
with
actually
this
dig
game,
a stealth game, a Loki stealth game. I might actually dig that.
that'd be interesting. Yeah, I think with this game being the perfect conclusion to Kratos' story, in my opinion, continuing having another game with Kratos would kind of belittle that point,
Mm.
Right.
and make that ending not as impactful as it was. So yeah,
It's weird because it's like a perfect ending for Kratos, but it's such like a short ending for everyone else. Like I feel like there's
yeah,
so much more that I want to know about these characters.
right, and that's why I kind of feel like that with how much they packed in here and how much is left unanswered. It's how do they transfer all of this stuff into another game that's supposedly leaving the Norse lands to go to another place, and
Yeah.
how do they continue those threads there?
Mm.
Where do we go from here? I just don't I can't visualize it. I can't picture it.
Yeah.
But okay, Jason, Kwasnicki rating, go.
All right, everybody. Don't kill me. This is and keep in mind my
Oh
rating
boy, here we
system
go.
is 1 to 10, with 5 being just average. This is a good game, but I've seen proclamations. This is the sequel we deserve. Blah 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 blah. Like, no, it's a good game. It's not a great game. I hold firm that 2018 was better. I would adjust my 2018 score to maybe an 8 or 8.5 from, I think I had it at 9,
Hmm.
and I would give this one maybe somewhere around a 7.
Okay,
It has really great moments
seven
that get
seven what?
um 7 world tree seeds. I don't know.
I thought you were gonna say Pokeball.
I did too.
I forget. Yeah, I almost forgot. It's been so long. I almost forgot about that joke. Uh, yeah, it's good. It's not great, or in my opinion, as good as 18.
Yeah. Okay. I respect it, to be honest. I totally do. Delilah, what are you doing? What are you up to?
Honestly, I got a new job, so
Oh yeah,
Woo!
I'll be doing that.
Employment. Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
employment.
But I have my full playthrough of God of War on my YouTube channel. Assassina-san. Assassina dash. I don't even know anymore. Assassina-san. That's it.
Look
There's
up
no dash or there. Just yeah.
just look up
Um.
Assassina dash san and Assassina underscore san and Assassina san, and you'll find her somewhere.
Yeah, and because
Uh,
it's like the end of the year, I'll be doing like my own personal game of the years and most anticipated games and all that bullshit.
yeah, and we got a Game Awards bonus episode coming up in December. So
Yes.
look forward to that because we take off. We're doing the same thing we do every year. We take off the month. We don't play a game for December. We just do a fun episode to talk about the end of the year, talk about the Game Awards, talk about what was announced, and talk
Talk about
about what
Doritos.
games. Talk about Doritos, and talk about our favorite games for the year. And man, I got some hot choices to talk about. My game, I have a new game of the year pick, and all of my favorite games this year were not nominated for game of the year, and I'm honestly the choices that are there this
So
year
stay
just
tuned for that hot take.
yeah, stay tuned for that exciting episode. You'll hear it here. Jason, you got nothing going on?
No.
Cool. All right, good talk. You can follow me on Twitter at Nibelheimian. You can also follow me on Hive at Twitter, or on Hive at Nibelheimian. In case Twitter goes under, who knows what the hell or when the hell that's gonna happen. You can follow Delilah on Twitter at Assassina_san, and I think also on Hive at Assassina_san.
Yeah.
If anyone's using Hive,
Yeah. And kind of.
it's not a
I'll wait
it's
for
so
Twitter to die to really use it. But
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
there. My username's secured. Not that
gotcha.
anyone would take Assassina-san.
You can follow Jason on Twitter at SolidQuads, but don't follow him. He forgets he has Twitter, and soon he
Elon
might
Musk
not
might
have
have.
it anyway.
Yeah, Elon Musk might have deactivated it for inactivity. I don't know.
Yeah, fucking Christ. If you like this episode, please, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Please like the episode, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, leave us a comment, tell us what you thought of the game. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the show. 5 stars preferred. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you didn't like. We really, really appreciate it. Please, please. The feedback is invaluable, and I really, really love hearing.
And we do
from you
appreciate
guys.
you all sitting with us for 3 hours ragging on a game that everybody is praising right now.
Yeah. Trust me, guys. I was really ready to love this game, and I
As was
did in
I.
some ways, and I also was very disappointed in some others.
I loved it, but I was critical of it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised
Um,
because you do seem to really love it, but you had a lot to say too. It was an
That
interesting
end game
conversation.
content really put things in perspective.
it kind of sours it a little bit for sure. Yeah, just make sure you share the show. If you're listening on Spotify too, I think you can rate us there. Please rate us. Give us the best rating you possibly can. It really, really helps the show grow. And if you love the show, you want it to grow. So leave us the reception and stuff. Jason, what's the next game we're playing?
Crisis Core, and watch me love this game that I'm dreading to play. Watch it happen.
You're not gonna love it, but I'm so happy we're able to force you to play it. We are playing Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. It's a PSP game. It's a prequel to Final Fantasy VII. So it's a PSP game, but it's also getting a remaster / kind of like a remake coming out this December. We will be playing that. That episode will be out in January, so stay tuned for that and play the game and just come back to the show in January and listen to that. And wait out for the bonus episode next month. There's going to be a bonus episode. So, or well, actually in a couple weeks from now, probably when this goes live. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.